Chair Stevens,
Present.
Vice Chair Martin,
Most definitely.
Secretary Fletcher,
Present.
Regent Bogard,
Here.
Regent Cox,
Here.
Regent Finan,
Here.
She's there.
we see.
I'm here.
Regent Finan is here. Regent Girdler,
Here. Gee.
Regent Green,
Here.
Regent Hamilton, Regent Herdink,
Here.
Regent Jackson,
Here.
Regent Rabinowitz,
Present.
Regent Smith,
Present.
and Regent Whitten.
Present.
All regents are present except for Regent Hamilton. We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. First item of business, Dr. Sarah Potter.
Thank you. We've got a presentation I'm very excited to share with you. To kick this off, I've got Dr. Telly Sellers, interim president of Big Sandy.
There we go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Zarapata, and our Board of Regents today. I have the opportunity to present an opportunity, a highlight of a partnership between Big Sandy Community and Technical College and Frontier Behavioral Health. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our Director of Workforce Solutions, Rochelle Burchett. But before I do, Rochelle gets extra bonus points and her name on the board today. She is ill, under the weather, but she said, I am no way going to miss this presentation this morning. So Rochelle, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Telly, and thank you to everyone, and good morning. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share. Before we get started and before I introduce Randy, let's take a look at this fantastic video.
Yeah, the mission of Frontier Behavioral Health is to kind of help spread hope throughout the region. We live in an area where there's a lot of social issues, and one of the things we want to do is to make sure that people understand that there's real hope out there, and there's real help out there, and we try to provide that real help and that real hope through our company.
While in treatment, they need love, compassion, to know that they're not just somebody, that they are loved regardless of past mistakes. That they have to know that what they've done in the past is the past. We don't live in the past, and we're not here to judge. We're here to help them get a brighter future. We have a wide variety of different services. We offer a wide variety of addiction treatment, and then we also do mental health. We do adult mental health, and we also do some pediatric and adolescent mental health. The addiction treatment, we primarily have our inpatient residential facilities along with our outpatient clinics. We provide medication-assisted treatment where we have patients that will meet with our medical providers, and we have different medications that can help with addiction treatment, that sort of thing. We have a full staff of licensed counselors that can provide good addiction treatment therapy to all of our patients that come into here. We also provide case management, which is we point out resources, and we lead our patients to different resources throughout the community that can kind of help them.
They care more than any other that I've seen, in my personal opinion. If you need one-on-one time, they'll give you all the one-on-one time you need. If you need space, they'll give you space. They don't try to force it to you or anything like that. They just listen to your concerns.
Education actually plays a big role in this, because I know from experience, because I've been there, I know that when you get into the education side, it pushes you in a direction, in a path, and gives you more of a plan. Okay, this is what I want to do with my life. So then you can pursue that. And when you pursue that and you go after that, then it changes everything. Education, to me, education is the best thing, because that way, whenever they get done with that education, then they have the opportunity to be able to step out into a job, and a good job.
When I first made the dean's list at the college and it was real surprising. I mean, especially when the first letter I got from them was a 3.5 GPA grade average. Then, like 3 days later, I got the 4.0 GPA one. It really surprised me. But that made me want to keep it up and not lose it. So I was able to keep it up all the way through. The first certificate I got in was the front end mechanic. Then I also got the engine repair, automotive air conditioning mechanic, automatic transmission and transaxle mechanic, manual transmission and drivetrain mechanic. Then the last one I got was brake repair. I keep them in this folder just so I can pack them around and show them off kindly. As a recovering addict, it's real important to have a plan.
The results that I've seen are amazing. A lot of my employees that I have now are actually, they went through the program. They've completed the program. They now work for us. They've got their kids back. They're just happy. You can see a smile on their face that they didn't have before when we first seen them.
And I've got a real good support system. Frontier, they support real good. Like, they don't forget about you when you walk out the door.
So I'm so excited about this partnership with the college and Frontier Behavior Health because we as a nation are suffering with those in addiction. Having something in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky to be able to meet the needs of that population is so important. And why I love about this partnership, it's just not about recovery, it's about helping them re-enter the environment, the communities, and the workforce.
This is an amazing partnership because it focuses on recovery, health, and hope, and the success of the students that Frontier and Big Sandy Community and Technical College serve every day. You know, education and changing the way we think is so important to the recovery process and simply just success, right? Simply just success. We are so excited to work with Frontier and building a partnership that not only serves our mission, but also serves the residents in our community.
Well, there you have it. And without further ado, let me introduce to you Randy Hunter, who is the CEO of Behavior Health. And he's going to tell you from the employer's perspective what we have worked up and how to work together with this first beginning pilot program. But I'm sure to tell you there's going to be many more programs after this. Go ahead, Randy.
Thank you, Rochelle. I just want to say thank you to the Board of Regents for the opportunity to speak this morning, and also to Dr. Sellers for his opportunity and his vision and his partnership to come alongside of us at Big Sandy Community Technical College to offer the opportunity for education for our residents as they go through our program. You know, right now we're focusing on 3 different programs that we're starting to roll out with this pilot project, and we've implemented this into our the phase of our program. It's a community reentry program where the residents of our program are beginning to reintegrate into society, and as we do that, we want to make sure that when each one of these folks leaves our facility, they have a skill, they have an opportunity for a job, an opportunity for a new future. And one of the things we want to just mention this morning is, you know, we're starting with the carpentry for the men's and for the women's programs. We have been approached by several partners in the community that are employers, that the job market it's hard to find good laborers at this point in Eastern Kentucky. And the carpentry program is going to allow some of our men and our women to be able to get some skills, to get a foundation, to begin to build new careers, new opportunities. 2 of the other programs that we're doing is the recovery coach program and the peer support specialist program. Those are vital in the recovery process. Those positions they're the entry-level positions for people that want to get into therapy. It's really kind of get their feet wet, if you will, in therapy, and beginning to come alongside those that are in recovery and walk with them through that. And they kind of, as it says, the recovery coach coaches them through the recovery process of that. So those programs are vitally important, and to be able to streamline those programs to help our folks to get the skills they need and to get that firm foundation, it's vitally important that when they leave our facilities, they have a vision, they have a new way of thinking, and they have new opportunities. And that's what these programs are doing for them. We're starting this program in December 15th, and hopefully we'll be able to have it fully up and running by the first of the year when the enrollment starts back right after January 1st. So I'm really excited about that. You know, one of the things that we were able to have an opportunity to do is to sponsor 60 individuals to be able to come in and take the peer support classes. That's one of the things that we want to do as Frontier is we want to give back to the community. We want to give hope. We want to provide people with opportunities anywhere that we can. And the opportunity to be able to provide 60 different individuals with the peer support specialist training, be able to sponsor them and to help them gain that knowledge and to get their foot in the door into the recovery field. It's just an opportunity for us. We're just thankful to be able to glad to give back. And again, we want to thank Big Sandy, Dr. Sellers, Rochelle, and all the other folks for the opportunity to be able to do that. And just briefly, I just want to mention, this is our pilot project with Big Sandy. We've already acquired 2 other buildings for another men's facility in Floyd County. And we also have another women's facility that we're opening here in Johnson County sometime in 2023. We have the buildings. We're starting the engineering for the construction, the remodeling, and we'll have both of those open. So we're going to be tripling our capacity. So our hopes are by the end of 2023, when we come back maybe a year from now and we look back at the gains and the program that we've built, that we're going to see success stories. Just like the gentleman in the video, Jamie Reynolds, he's proud of his degrees. He came through our program. He got his GED while he was with us, and he went on. We helped him enroll into Big Sandy, and you can see the difference in this young man's life. Education is important. Education is valuable, and it's part of the program that we want to build as we begin to spread hope and opportunities all throughout Eastern Kentucky. So again, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be able to partner with the community college system, Big Sandy in particular, Dr. Sellers, the Board of Regents, and especially Rochelle for all of your help and your guidance along the way with this. We just thank you.
Thank you. And in addition, as Randy said, we also have a team that goes to Frontier Behavioral Health who helps them get with provided laptops. And they're working, I think you said yesterday that you had 9 people get their GEDs.
Yes, we've already had 9 people that are in the GED program that are getting those. And we see a lot of that in our programs. A lot of folks, especially here in Appalachia and Eastern Kentucky, they fall to the wayside in the school system, and they come through and they don't have a high school degree. So one of the things we want to do early in their recovery process is to be able to recognize their needs. If they need the GED, we want to make sure we get them enrolled in that program as soon as possible so they can get that foundation so they can begin to get into these other programs, the carpenter, the recovery coach, and the peer support. And it's been an amazing process so far.
Thank you, Randy. And the last thing I want to just add is that we have worked through Workforce with our apprentice coordinator, Carl Wilson. He has created a pathway from peer support all the way to the Morehead State University to a master's degree. So that's what it's about, building pathways and having options for people. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to allow us to be here today to present to you. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sellers.
Thank you so much. And just to add one more piece to put a laser focus on what Randy or Cheryl were talking about is when Randy is bringing these other employer partners with us to place students who are going through our programs, we're also bringing those university and college partners as well. So as that student flips through, that's my favorite part of the video when he's showing off his certificates. We want them to also show off that bachelor's degree and show off that master's degree as they keep. So this is about an ecosystem of all of us working together, which that's a prime example of how we're doing it with Frontier Behavioral Health. Dr. Zarapod on the board, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sellers. Next item on the agenda is Vice President Lynn Hillis to introduce the agenda item. Lynn?
Well, Lynn is coming up here. She's going to be talking about the employee benefits survey, which happened in October, and an update on the HR dashboard.
Got it. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm looking forward to sharing some information with you today about our benefits survey and the HR dashboard that we're going over. So Hannah, next slide, please. So today what I'm going to be talking to you about is the benefits survey, what we found out. I want to share a little bit about how we want to think about our benefit strategy going forward, and also share the first version of the HR dashboard that I also introduced to you in the last board meeting. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So as we talked about in the last meeting, we have the survey went out with open enrollment. There were 10 questions, but most importantly, we did have 100% participation. And with that, we had 3,600 of our employees give us feedback. So we learned some stuff from the survey, but we also validated a lot of things that we had already heard from our employees. And the news that came out of this survey, which you'll see to me is actually pretty phenomenal, and it aligns to a strategy going forward as we think about benefits. So next slide, please. This is the money slide to me. So there were two questions that I think are the most important in this particular survey. So level of satisfaction and what you would typically call your net promoter score question. Would you refer KCTCS? So 84% of our employees are either very satisfied or satisfied with our benefit offering. And in my experience, this is an unusually high number for satisfaction in what I've seen in other organizations. So I think that says a lot for our ability to attract and retain based on our benefits. Second question is the net promoter score question. And we toyed on whether we wanted to ask this question or not, because we weren't sure if it would come back as really bad or good. So we decided we wanted to ask it because we wanted data and we wanted to be able to figure out how good or what we needed to do to improve on our benefits. So only 7.2% of our employees said they would not refer KCTCS as a place to work because of the benefits. That's a pretty phenomenal number when you think about a net promoter score number. So we have great data around benefits, and it gives us the ability to attract and retain for our benefits perspective. So we know that our employees are satisfied with the benefits, but we're also beginning to learn a little bit more through the survey as well. So next slide, please, Hannah. So I wanted to take that question, the level of satisfaction, and break it down a little bit into the demographics that we have here at KCTCS. So what you'll see here is that our faculty and staff are pretty much equally satisfied or very satisfied based on our benefits. Where personally I begin to see a little bit of a thing that we need to look at is our underrepresented minorities. Now, they're not saying that they're dissatisfied with our benefits, but what they are saying is that they're in what I would call the neutral zone. So if we want to be an employer that attracts and retains a diverse workforce, we probably need to figure out what we can do from a benefits perspective for these particular employees. The survey didn't give us the data that we need to figure that out, but it did give us something where we can point to make an improvement for our underrepresented minorities. We also learned that our new employees really, really like our benefits. And so this is a good indicator of our ability to attract based on our benefits here at KCTCS. So next slide, please, Hannah. So the next two slides get into a couple questions that we saw play out in the third question, which I think was very important, which was the open-ended question. So this particular slide tells us that the most important benefits that our employees look at is healthcare, retirement, and vacation. That's probably not a huge surprise to anybody. Those are like in the Maslow's hierarchy, the table stake benefits that people look for. But they also said that they're interested in benefits around more employer contributions. So I guess the vision and dental is something that they're looking for more employer contributions. Again, I think something that we had seen in the past, but we're validated with here. Short-term disability is something else that they were looking at, as well as things like pet insurance, accident insurance, critical illness, those types of things. And the interesting thing is that most of these we already offer to our employees. So that says to me that we don't do a good job educating. So we have 5 different supplemental vendors that we work with. And we do offer short-term disability, but I think what our employees are saying to us is they want us as KCTCS to help contribute to the cost of that. So while we do offer that benefit, there's an opportunity to look at how KCTCS can do a little bit more, particularly with short-term disability, because we heard a lot about maternity leave for our employees, and we hear a lot about that not only in the survey, but we also hear it anecdotally and qualitatively through our employees. So next slide, please. So the one thing that was interesting was this whole notion of flexible work scheduling and more vacation. KCTCS has a pretty lucrative vacation plan, and so this was interesting to me. But when you look at the open-ended comments, you get a little bit more data. And so I think some of the things about this, and we talked about this last night, Regent Whitten, about the whole notion of if we've got all this lucrative vacation, can we take it? And so there was also this notion of buy and pay back for vacation. And so that's something we might want to look at as well. But one of the comments that we saw, and this was interesting to me and it made a lot of sense. So when we do institutional close, we do have some employees that are not able to take advantage of those 2 weeks. So it could be maintenance, janitorial, those types of things. So there were some comments that said, can you give us some time in the summer when there's other people here so that we can take that time off just at a different time? So when you think about the comments we got, it may not necessarily be that we don't offer as much. It might be that some of our policies don't allow people to take the vacation. And so there's some tweaks that we might be able to do there as well. We also saw this notion of employee discounts. So we do have employee discounts at KCTCS. But I think we have an opportunity to do a better job of looking at additional organizations that we can partner with. So our employees told us that travel and restaurants were the most important employee benefits there from the discounts perspective. The last question, so again, 3 questions in my opinion that told us what we needed to do. The last question is the open-ended question. So Hannah, if you could go to that slide, please. We had over 3,000 comments in the survey about our benefits, and we asked our employees, if you could choose one benefit that you would like to have added, what would that be? And what you see here is a word cloud with some of those particular benefits. So again, pay was one of those, and it came up top, flexible work schedule and pay. So what I'd like to try to, get us to think about here is our employees are telling us our benefits package is pretty darn good. But we know, and we know this from exit survey data as well, is that our compensation needs to be looked at, and Huron's coming in to do that. So I believe that if we can get this compensation piece in the right level, and if we can level it up with this high satisfaction for benefits, we could have a very powerful total rewards package to attract and retain our employees. So the good thing about this is that we're learning our benefits is good. And they're also telling us that pay is something that we want to take a look at. You'll notice the leave, the short-term disability. We actually have a meeting next week with one of our vendors to actually look at short-term disability and determine if that's something that we can absorb and help do an employer contribution for our employees as well. So some of the things that also came out that were a surprise to us, our employees are looking for help for things like hearing aids. They also asked for reduced vesting time in our 403B, which is a topic that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. So the whole notion of, they also talked about fall and spring break off as well. So there's some things in here that we can take a look at. But one of the things that I'd like us to begin to think about from a strategic perspective is how we look at our benefits and where we focus. So next slide, please. So this slide is really interesting to me. So if you think about, we have 4 generations in the workforce now, and 25% of our employees are baby boomers at KCTCS. And they're looking for things like retirement and traditional health care. So I feel like from a baby boomer perspective, we're doing a pretty good job of meeting the needs of that particular generation of employees. The majority of the workforce is made up of our Gen X, and that's not only at KCTCS, but across the United States as well. So these employees have graduated from college. They've most likely already paid their college loans off, but now they have kids that are going to college. And so there could be a benefit in there around helping with their children that go to college. But what's more interesting to me when we think about benefits is our millennials and Gen Z. So we do have an older workforce at KCTCS, and we need to begin to think about how do we recruit more Gen Z and more millennials. And when you think about millennials, they are looking for things like flexible work schedules. They want their their student loans repaid. They're looking for hybrid work. They're looking for career advancement. So those are some of the things that we need to think about if we want to attract more of those employees. And when you think about our talent pipeline, and I'm going to talk a little bit here about the number of retirees that we have coming up, Gen Zs and millennials should be very important to us as we think about our talent makeup at KCTCS. If you talk about Gen Zs, from a benefit perspective from them, they had just entered the workforce when COVID started. And many of them either were furloughed or they lost their job. So Gen Z are really interested in more of your traditional benefits. Job security is very important to them. And they're also interested in flexible work. There's also a trend in the market around unlimited vacation. So there's some things there that we can look at to attract our Gen Zs. But that's a really important piece of, I believe, our talent strategy going forward. And it aligns directly to benefits on how do you attract and retain. So what I think we learned from the study are a couple different things. If we want to continue to enhance our benefits package, which it already is very lucrative, we should be thinking about short-term disability. We should also be thinking about how do we get the benefits package more attractive for our underrepresented minorities, and how do we focus our benefits package so that we can attract and retain more Gen Z and millennials. So the other thing we learned about the benefits through the benefits survey is that we need to do a much better job educating about our benefits. We have a lot of what the HR peer team calls hidden benefits, and our employees don't know about them. So part of our strategy going forward is to not only look at our talent makeup and see where we need to attract and retain, but it's also about this whole notion of how do we educate about our benefits. So you'll see us further begin to think about this from a strategic perspective as we get more mature in looking at our talent data. So the next slide just really gives you a look at the supplemental benefits that we do have. We do have an opportunity here through, I think, can you go back one slide, Hannah? Oh, wait a minute here. Oh. I'll start from there. I think the slides might be a little mixed up here on mine. So these are employer sponsor benefits. These benefits are already available to our employees, and a lot of our employees may not know about this. So the first one that's really interesting to me is a smart shopper. I haven't seen this before in an organization, but this particular benefit puts the notion of consumer-driven healthcare right in the hands of our employees. So if, for example, you are going to get a surgery or you're going for a lot of tests, our employees have the ability to shop the market, look for the best price for them at the quality point that they want. And if they can get a less expensive price, they can get a check or a cutback from that. So I had an employee that works in my group just the other day say, hey, I just got a $200 check because I saved the organization money on tests. So that's a pretty progressive benefit around consumer-driven healthcare that I personally haven't seen, but it's a really good benefit. The other thing that we just introduced in direct response to student loan forgiveness in the end of September was a program called Savvy. And that's through our vendor called TIAA, where we help our employees with student loan forgiveness. So those are just a couple of the benefits that we have that our employees may not know about. So the next slide is what can we be looking at in the future? So I really think that our employees have told us that they believe our benefits are pretty darn good. And so from a strategic perspective, I think what we need to focus on over the next 6 months is taking a look at the short-term disability. We also have a group of people that are being pulled together as a direct result from the Faculty Senate to look at faculty vacation and how we might be able to improve that. But more importantly, compensation. If we can get that right, that balance it's not going to stop us from attracting and retaining. I mean, that balance of compensation and benefits and total rewards could be so lucrative for us as an organization. The last piece here that we heard through the open comments is our employees wanted us to shorten the vesting period of our 403B. So one of our action items today that we'll vote on in a little bit is reducing that vesting time to 1 year, which was actually a recommendation from our HR peer team, and we'll talk about that later as well. So what questions do you have?
Can you further explain, did you say unlimited vacation or unending? I don't know how you said it, but
Unlimited. You're seeing that in the market now where some progressive employers are going with unlimited vacation.
what do you mean by unlimited? As in you can roll it over and keep it, or
You
can
can
just
take
never
as
work
much
for-
as you want.
Okay, well, I'm very curious as to whether or not that's going to be spread to UK and the older people on the top.
Yeah.
Who have been here through the foundation of the organization.
Yeah, that,
Could you better
it's something that organizations are looking for, but what I think people are finding is when you go to unlimited vacation, people aren't taking as much vacation because sometimes they feel guilty about asking for vacation and taking unlimited. It is progressive, but it is a benefit. I personally would rather have a set amount, but it is something that organizations are looking at.
Do you know of any companies that are offering that right now?
I don't know of companies in Kentucky being newer to the market, but I know of several organizations in Ohio that are doing, and I know some organizations in Arizona as well.
Most of the companies I'm familiar with are software startups, project-based work. And I do think, as you mentioned, it's almost guilt-based in the project-based work that people feel guilty to take the time off. So
I just like to look at their endurancy to stay in business.
right.
Yeah, and I would add some of those same groups are actually backing off from that. I know that was a very progressive trend in the beginning. And I'm seeing some situations in Ohio with larger institutions where they are backing away from that. So I would proceed with caution on that end. Lynn, a question to you. How were these benchmarked against other institutions?
Our benefits?
Yes.
I haven't done any benchmarks with other institutions on how our benefits work. I know we benchmark with UK quite a bit, but what I would suggest is I look at this like employee engagement. So I think we need to benchmark within ourselves. So if our employees are telling us they're not happy, that's giving us an indicator. But if our employees are very happy, that's a good indicator. But to your point, if we want to attract employees, we probably should look at some benchmarking as well.
And then
And
my
to
other-
Regent Finance point, we almost identically mirror UK's benefits because that's where the community colleges came from originally. So
Yeah.
it's almost verbatim.
And I guess my other comment, I would assume that there would be a pretty deep dive in terms of impact on budget if and when any of these new recommendations would be taken.
Absolutely. And so that's why I keep pushing us to, if we want to spend budget, in my role that I have, I would suggest we spend more budget on compensation because our employees are telling us that our benefits are good. Even our new employees are telling us that. And just anecdotally, I was just talking to someone yesterday and they said, gosh, my friends would love to work here because of the benefits that you guys have. So again, if we're thinking about where to invest our money, I think compensation is going to get us the bigger bang because with benefits, with 84% satisfaction, you kind of get to that law of diminishing returns. You know, how much do you want to invest to get incrementally more than 84%?
Can you clarify in parentheses, not every college offers this benefit, the tuition assistance? Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so there are some colleges that, and I can't name them, but I've seen some of the paperwork that actually fund tuition assistance. And they use money in their own colleges to fund tuition assistance. I can't give you an exact number, but there's one college that puts away X number of dollars a year and they use that for tuition assistance. But KCTCS as a whole does not have that.
And that would be above and beyond the KCTCS waiver. That would be like for your four-year institutions.
Yes. Yeah, I actually have a document on my desk for one of our colleges, one of the HR peer team members sent to me where they're doing some things on that as well. So I'll have to go back and take a look at that.
But that is a place where we need to formalize a
Yes.
program that, that was the common message at every tour stop that I've been to, that employees used to have that they don't have now legislatively. It used to be legislated that there was up to 6 hours a semester could be waived. That went away. And we do have a cohort that's going to be going through Morehead State. One cohort started last year. This year is going to start again. There's going to be a application process for that begins in probably January to start up the summer of 23. But that's 16, 17 people. So we need something larger than that. We need a more formal process. The ones that I do know of, where we are funding them, are typically in allied health to get advanced degrees. I don't know if any of the presidents want to comment on that.
Oh, somebody's got to stand up and take credit.
At BCTC, we've set aside 50,000 to help. As you all know, finding nursing faculty is like a finding needle in a haystack. So it's an incentive that we come up with to encourage them to come to work for us.
Thank you, Dr. Acappo.
I just have a follow-up to that, because I understand about the group that's starting in the cohort. Is there any effort being made for people who were sort of caught in the throes of the removal of the tuition waiver? For example, you had people employed that were halfway through their degree program and then the tuition waiver went away. Is there a way to prioritize those folks so that they can actually finish what they started? I'll let you answer that, and then I have another question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, and it's something that we need to think about as we think about moving forward for tuition. Definitely, I've got a mental note and I'll write it down. It's a great idea. Thank you.
I appreciate that. The second part is when you first came, one of the questions I asked was, how are we looking at KCTCS versus UK employees? Because obviously we're comprised of a variety of retirement type programs and designations for our employees. This survey I didn't get, obviously, because I think it was KCTCS employees.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing moving forward to kind of level the playing field so that our employees are not getting better benefits or worse benefits based on their retirement designation? What are we doing with things like rollovers of vacation? If you're going to give unlimited, and I'm not saying you are, but
No.
okay, but
I
just
probably
an
should have not
example.
said that. Yeah.
Yeah, because my ears went up immediately when you said that. But when you have people who cannot even roll over vacation, for example, you're granted vacation and then you try to take it and then you're removed vacation, so you actually lose your vacation,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not allowed to roll it. So to me, that's stealing your vacation. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just be very honest about it. And then there are people who have banked vacation for a year at a time that are in your same HR designation. I could see that as an HR issue.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? If we're all in the
Yes,
same designation.
absolutely.
And lastly, if you are a 10-month employee receiving the same vacation as a 12-month employee, why are 12-month employees not receiving vacation compensation for the 2 months that they actually work that other employees do not?
Yeah, I think that, when you think about the 10, 11, 12-month employees, it's particularly in the faculty, and I think that's part of what this group is really going to be looking at as well. The rollover vacation, many organizations do that, but they limit it on the number of days that you can roll over. So they'll cap it at maybe 5 days where you can roll over vacation. But we do need to think about this whole notion of UK and KCTCS, and we are seeing less and less of those employees as we do have an older workforce and some of them are retiring. So we're seeing more KCTCS employees and less of the UK, but it is something that we can take a look at.
And lastly, one final question, and then I'll be quiet. I
Oh, no,
promise,
you're
but,
fine.
well, not all day, but for this.
Okay.
Is there any thought to look retrospectively at the actual change that occurred with compensation? Because I see this as a very big piece of the compensation. When the system was actually formed, of course, I was here. I was here before it was formed, so I was in the groundwork of its inception. But there was a movement, I'll say that, to sort of entice or coerce or force, whatever you want to say, employees to leave the UK system and go into the KCTCS system. And what happened was actual substantial financial contributions to people who would switch over, to where people who would make that retirement switch had perhaps 3,000, 5,000, whatever added to their base salary. They received free tuition for themselves and their kids at all KCTCS colleges. UK employees did not receive that. So you perhaps could have a longstanding 25-year UK employee who has been very dedicated to the organization in the yellow box that you had up there that said this is the majority of the workforce committed, keeping the system afloat right now, who were not receiving that benefit, but someone brand new to the organization would outweigh by far the compensation and the benefit. And I think retrospectively, to respect all employees who have contributed to this system and its success that have kept it buoyed for many, many years, I think we need to take a really hard look at what happened there with that dynamic, because it definitely created rifts in people's morale for the institution. Again, the people that were really dedicated to the institution. So again, I've been here 30 years. There are people who have been here probably 8 or 9 that make close to what I make. I have 7 college degrees. So I would just like that to be looked at in some way, because I do think that's a fair
These
decision.
incentives happen? I don't recall this.
When the system first started,
Okay.
several of the employees would say, well, if you go over, you're going to get this raise that KCTCS is giving to KCTCS employees this year. I decline that, and I will retire a UK, but very dedicated to KCTCS. I just happen to like my benefits. But I do think there is a need to go back and look at that very closely, because it definitely widened the chasm of employee compensation in a system that is supposed to be united.
Okay, that's a great point, and it's something that we probably want to have Huron take a look at as well, because as they do the compensation study. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Chair Stephen, I think we need to put everything on hold that would cost us anything substantially until Huron comes in and gives us their recommendations, because we have no clue as to how much that's going to cost. And that's our biggest problem, is compensation, competitive compensation. And it's good to know from the employee standpoint what's important. We all know what's the most important, what's number one priority right now, and that's compensation. And I think we ought to put all of our resources on what Huron comes back with and what kind of recommendations.
Thank you for saying that. That's
Yes.
exactly what we talked about in cabinet. We had the same discussion.
Barry, I totally agree with you. I think there's been a lot of investment made in the compensation and with the intent of Huron coming on to address this. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, great point. And that gets back to the point of, this law of diminishing returns. Our benefits, our employees are saying they're good. So what they're not saying is our pay. So let's put all of our eggs in that basket and get a really good total rewards package.
And if there's things that we can do that has minimal effect, let's do them. But
Right.
I think for right now, and any type of monetary contributions or whatever ought to be held off until we look at compensation.
Thank you.
I guess question or thought I would have, number one, 100% participation, salute. I've never had 100% of the people do anything.
Well, we embedded it in the new enrollment survey.
It was forced.
Yeah, it was
It
forced.
doesn't matter. There's somebody who always holds out.
It was mandatory.
There's just that person that always holds out. I agree with everything Barry said. I think one of the things that is always important for us to remember, though, is that, and this is just my opinion, but pay is important. It's soon forgotten, sadly. Benefits are there all the time. So we don't want to find ourselves putting all of our eggs. I agree with what you're saying, but we want to be careful here, because benefits become a whole lot of what defines and determines your culture.
Yes.
And to that end, I guess the question that I have on this is, one of the things I said in our organization was, we're not going to spend $1 more on benefits, but we can do different things with the dollars that we have. And
what we learned was that there were benefits that we were offering that were costing us money that weren't valued. They just weren't valued by employees. We got rid of those and said, what is important to you? And our learning was parental leave.
Mm-hmm.
That, if we would offer, and just saying it like it is, paid leave, and that includes for adoptions, that's everything. And include it for all sex and genders.
Mm-hmm.
That benefit changed the culture of our organization significantly and cost us very little, but spoke a whole lot to what we were saying to employees was important, that they have balance in their life and in families. So I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying, I think if we can say, what benefits are meaningful to employees, and are we offering benefits that are just not meaningful or not driving what we want? Let's get rid of them.
Yeah,
So-
that's a great point. And parental leave is something that our employees have told us time and again, and that's why I keep, hinging on the short-term disability, parental leave. When I interviewed, Dr. Zarapata said, Lynn, I think this is something that you should look at as the parental leave piece. Yes, Chairman Fletcher.
I want something that Russell said, that package that we offer has a cost associated with it. And when I asked for this last year to be looked at and to talk about a cafeteria type plan, it wasn't so that someone here or in your office would say, here are the benefits that are available, take them or leave them. In my mind, we were going to ascribe a cost to benefits and within a package, allow employees to pick and choose what they wanted within that and not just have a bulk package that gets delivered to their door that maybe they use and maybe they don't.
Mm-hmm.
For me, parental leave would not be something I'd necessarily need. I'm an empty nester, right? But maybe for me, a wellness initiative or the gym discount or, the unlimited vacation, whatever, to let them kind of pick and choose within that package, but ascribe a cost to that package that would better promote that equality across the system. I loved hearing that now we're a system when we're talking about benefits. We're not 16 colleges, we're a system. I love that. But I think that it would really behoove us to look at and work with our vendors to say, what options can people pick and choose here? And that way, if they're unhappy, it's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these things, they don't really get a choice. As Patsy said, it wasn't given to her as a choice to, get a raise when everyone else got a raise because she was UK and not, now she chose to stay UK. That's her choice. She's happy with it. She just told us. But, within this package, are there things that could make some of these other folks happier if they were able to choose them and others be able to leave them? So that cafeteria plan, I think, just needs a little more flexibility, but
Mhm.
great work so far on just getting all this baseline data together. I'm really interested to see what Huron says, and I think they'll bring some benchmark data.
Yeah, I agree. And the cafeteria style. So when I first started, people said to me that, the board wants us to think about cafeteria style. So we are limited in some of that because we use the state benefits. But when you were talking, I was like, okay, I get it now. You're thinking these supplemental benefits, is there a way to package those in bundles, so to speak, that reduce the cost so that employees can choose? Yeah, I think that's a great idea to think about as we get past the Huron study.
And if someone chooses not to take those benefits, then what happens to their additional dollars within that plan? Let that also be flexible. Maybe
Yeah.
that's an extra couple of vacation days a year.
Right.
Maybe that's, a spring break somebody wanted. Maybe that's, there's endless possibilities, but the possibilities become theirs and they get control of that, which I think makes everybody feel happier.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This is really good news.
I guess one of those low cost benefits you're looking at there is the flexible work schedules and remote work. I noticed on your one slide where it showed the Gen X and boomers, it showed that KCTCS offers this. I know the system office has a pretty robust remote flexibility schedule, but how are the colleges in relation to that? Are we seeing the same kind of thing at the colleges? And what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on the college. So right now, and one of the things that I was asked when I started was, can we put together a remote flex policy? And sometimes I feel like I've been here 10 years, but it's been 4.5 months. So I am, trying to work through these things. But the whole notion is some of our colleges do not do remote flex work. Some of them do. And so right now it is an individual college decision on whether they do that. And that really is, it's about the kind of culture that that college president wants to establish. It's about how they want to run their business and what's important to running that business. I think it's probably a good discussion for us to have at PLT and talk to the presidents about that. But right now, we've really left that up to the presidents as it's kind of their college to run. Any other questions?
Thank you, Lynn. I think next up is your HR dashboard.
Yes, it is. So make sure that. So Hannah, if you could pull up the dashboard. So the last time that we spoke, I talked a lot about we need to start to manage our talent through data. And so first, I want to give a shout out to Courtney Smith on my team who put together this HR scorecard. We realize we can't keep it on Excel forever, but for right now, it's our first pass at it. And I'm going to share with you some of the things here. So we'll get that all on. Is that all on one slide, Hannah? Yeah, I think so. Be able to see this here. So I just want to point out a couple things here. So this is the first stab at the scorecard. And what you see here now is, Hannah, if you could push that little button right there, it's going to give us the total system. So what we've done is we put together a dashboard that gives every college the opportunity to look at their own talent. And so the presidents have seen this, the cabinet's seen it, the HR peer team has seen it and provided feedback with this. So we're really starting to understand what's going on here. So if you look at the average age of our new hires, that's 41. And so if you remember that last generational slide I showed you, we need to probably figure out how we can target and bring in some younger talent. Because if you also look, we have about 22% of our workforce that's eligible to retire in the next year. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to retire. We're not going to have a mass exodus, but from an HR and a talent perspective, we have to begin to think about this. And so one of the things that you'll see us start to do next year is to really think about succession planning. So 57 of those eligible retirees are in the pay bands 12 and above. So you're looking at about 57 people that could be leaving the organization, and we may or may not have successors for them. So succession planning is something I'm not sure we've done at KCTCS, but when you look at that average age of our employees, when you look at 25% of our employees are baby boomers, and when you look at how many are eligible to retire, that's a data point from a talent perspective that we really need to begin to think about from HR. The other piece of data here that's actually good news is if you look at the diverse employees that are hired. So since January 1st, we've hired almost 15% of our employees have been diverse. When you benchmark that, which we're going to start to do against the census data, that's a pretty good number. So one of the things we're going to work on next is looking at the census data for each one of our colleges and comparing that to how we're hiring so that we can see if we're doing better than what's available in the market or are we behind. So that's another piece of data that we haven't had in the past. You'll also see here that, let's see, if you can go down a little bit, Hannah, please. The next part of the dashboard, I don't want to spend too much time on because it's actually compensation, and Huron will do a lot for us for that. But what I do want to point out here is that most of our workforce is comprised of women. And when you think about that, you've got the average age, there's about a $3,900 difference between the pay for men and the pay for women. Where you see most of this play out is in the higher pay bands. So there are more men in the 15, 16 and unbanded than there are women. And so when you think about that, that inherently could impact this number. But really in the levels, there's not that much disparity, but I'm going to leave that for Huron to really take a look at the compensation. But at the very least, this has given our colleges some information to look at that they may not have had in the past. So let's go down to workforce risk analysis. This is really looking at our turnover and exit survey data. So our turnover right now is, if you see right now, our total turnover is 15%. And that includes voluntary turnover, which people are leaving on their own. Involuntary, we've asked them to leave. And then look at that retirement. Almost 23% of our workforce have retired. And so a lot of those retirees are professors, faculty, and those types of things. And we already know that it's hard to recruit those individuals. So it's really important to retain the ones that we have as well. So the one thing, if you think about, I've looked at some Coupa studies, average turnover for higher education is about 13%, but that's voluntary only. So we've coupled in all three of those buckets into the 15%. So we actually are doing pretty good when you think about higher education from a turnover perspective, particularly when a lot of that turnover is in the retirement. There is one thing around attrition that does worry me a bit, and it is the new hire turnover. So we're losing about 18% of our new hires in the first year of employment. So from an HR perspective, what that would tell you is it could be a bad hire. So are the recruiting practices right? Are we onboarding? Do these people feel welcome? And that's really, a lot where the manager comes. I don't know that we, have a common onboarding process across KCTCS. And are they getting the training and support that they need? So the market is so tight, and to be losing, 12% of our employees in the first year, that worries me a little bit, which says that, we may need to begin to target on looking at onboarding and, do we have the right job match? Are we recruiting the right people into the organization? And then the last thing I'll touch base on is, if you can move over a little bit, Hannah, is the exit survey data. So this is the new exit survey that we've just implemented. And unfortunately, this only represents 12 people, so it's not too much. We're still rolling this out. But what this would show is that this is interesting. If you go down just a little bit, if you look at this right here, the people that left KCTCS, here's that net promoter again. 92% of them would still recommend this is a great place to work. When you have someone walking out the door that would recommend this place is a great place to work, that's a phenomenal number. But people are leaving for, I'm sorry, Hannah, if you move back over a little bit. People are leaving for better opportunity, and 100% of the people that have left in this exit survey data got more pay. So again, that gives us the pay piece. So it's really about better opportunity. There's some things about job dissatisfaction here. If you break that down, it gets into workload. So we hear, a lot about the workload and those types of things, and maybe short on resources. So the next iteration of the scorecard will have our recruiting data, and it will also have mobility and agility. So who are we promoting within, and where are those employees going? This is our first stab at it, but it's beginning to tell a story. So the benefits data, this data, we're beginning to understand our talent story, to begin to think strategically about talent at KCTCS. So questions or comments?
I'd just like to add one thing to that. And for the same reasons, it's so important for us to build relationships with our students in that first year. It's important to do that with our employees too. So that's on us. And you can help with that with mentorship programs. There's a lot of things that we could be doing that we're not necessarily doing in a formal way. There's a lot of one-offs that happen, and it really depends what type of role the person's in as well. Do they work in a team, or do they typically, are they a knowledge worker that typically works by themselves? And so it's building that team mentality and building that connection to KCTCS and our colleges. I think that's going to be very important to lower that rate.
Yeah, that's a great point. Other questions or comments?
Lynn,
Is there-
Lynn, thank you for getting this information together. I think this does start to tell us kind of more of the big picture of what we're doing. And I'm glad to see the workload fairness on there, because I think what Brianna and Patsy have kind of touched on, when we're talking about resources at the college level, everything that we're talking about as far as being able to take time off, work-life balance, that all kind of stems from this conversation about recruitment and retention. And that's kind of the foundation of what we're looking at. So if we have turnover, if we have people who are pulling extra loads, or they have faculty vacation that they're unable to take because the policies are confusing or unconventional, I think that's kind of the basis of what we're looking at. And so when we're talking about, vacation days and things like that, I think that's a lot where that's coming from, because like you said, staff, we get 40 days. Of course, faculty, it's a little different. But if you are trying to do the work of 2 people or more, and you're not able to take those days, and I think that's where the answer came from as well, about getting paid out for some of that vacation. So I think our recruitment and our retention, that's really the foundation, and that ties into the compensation piece of it. So thank you for bringing that up and addressing that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Another quick question, job dissatisfaction. Everything that you see there comes from the leader, whoever that person's leader is. Do you envision a time where we do a broad-based leader training skills sort of build up to begin to address some of that? Because each and every one of those,
Yes.
that person's
Yes.
dissatisfied because of their leader. Now, I know that's like saying duh.
Well, no, I mean, well, one of the things that I've heard very frequently as I've been doing these small group meetings with people in the system office here, it's been glaringly apparent that we need to have leadership, and we have some people that get promoted into managerial positions that just don't have the training for it.
Right.
And again, it's one of those, it's one-off things if they do find the training, but we don't have a formal program to manage it. And you're exactly right.
Yeah, I think it would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree. I actually have developed a leadership development strategy. Haven't shared it yet. We are going to pilot in the system office probably late January, early February. And I'm going to also invite the colleges if they want to include some people for the first cohort of frontline manager training. So I've built a coaching model, and we're working on that as well. But that was in my interview process. I heard loud and clear. But you're absolutely right. And so we've talked about benefits and pay. The third part of retention is the culture and the leader. And so to your point, I think coupling those 3 together, if you can get that right, it's pretty powerful. Thank you.
Lynn, I would also like to comment to follow up on Dr. Zarapata's statement. If you recall, we also have the Lead Academy. We have major formal initiatives that really involve all regions of KCTCS, and people are nominated, and hopefully they're nominated because they have leadership potential and, perhaps a future in leadership and management. So perhaps we need to take what we have and expand that to the 2.0, which is, this is sort of the general big picture of basic leadership concepts, and look a little more closely at people who have had leadership development before you move them into a managerial position or a leadership position. It's kind of like the cart before the horse. That's the whole purpose of these kinds of programs.
Yeah.
Is to develop this person, hopefully for promotion, not to promote and then try to develop the person. That
Yeah,
seems a
we've
little
got
bit-
to scale these up, because if you look at the same people that are in the peer teams are the same people that get to go through the Lead Academy, are the same people that end up being chairs of these teams, and it's leaving out the people that don't necessarily get to be involved in those.
The other thing that does is, if you look at emerging leaders in the organization, most of your diverse employees are at that more entry level. And so if you want to grow diverse leaders, you build emerging leaders and promote them within the system. Any other questions or thoughts?
I love the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your guidance and feedback.
Thank you, Lynn.
The next item will be Beverly Malloy to finance, and present that agenda item, and then we'll take a break after this. Huh? No. Oh.
Good morning. The financial statements depict activity through the first quarter of FY '23, which ended on September 30th, 2022. So we are going to compare our revenues and expenses as well as our assets and liabilities between the first quarter of FY '22 with the first quarter of FY '23. So the first point I want to make is that the numbers on our financial reports are represented in thousands. The actual number includes an additional 3 zeros. So please keep that in mind as we review these financial reports. So please scroll down to the end. So as we compare 9/30 appropriated revenues in excess of expenditures with 9/30/21, we see an increase of $3.4 million. So overall, we're improving, and we can appreciate that. So let's, I want to scroll back up to the top for us to look at our revenues. Okay, so the initial state appropriation budget for current year was $201.9 million. This amount was up $22.7 million in comparison with the prior year. And so the initial state appropriation budget included $3.2 million in debt service allocation as included in the state's biennial budget. The $3.2 million was collected back by the Commonwealth for KCTCS's debt service. Now, normally in quarter one, we would see 30% in the last column, but because of that collection of the debt service, we see 29%, okay? As we look at our tuition and charges are up 6.5% from the prior year. This reflects a slight increase in enrollment as well as the $3 tuition increase. If you recall, our tuition increased from $179 per credit hour to $182 per credit hour. So when we look at our investment income, we had a $3 million loss, and that's attributed to the increase in our federal funds rate. It's the highest that it's been since 2008, and in November, it was voted that it is now 3.7 to 4%. So of course, we realize that inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. So now let's look at our sales and services. That educational activity is down $16.6 million from the previous year. And we attribute that to transfers, course charges, bookstore commissions, and other administrative charges and sales that are in this category. The COVID tuition and fee recovery was also included in this account category. The large decrease is due to the decline in our federal COVID tuition and fee recovery, which accounted for $19.9 million in FY '22. Okay, so turning our attention now to expenses, if you can scroll down. We see that our instructional expenses are down by $14.1 million from the prior year. This is the result of the decreases in COVID fee revenue recovery, which is down $16.8 million over the prior year, and equipment expenses, which is down $1.7 million over the prior year. And we look at our student financial aid. Student financial aid is down $15 million in comparison with the prior year. This is due to decreases in scholarships and student waivers, which are down by $21.2 million and $581,000 respectively. These decreases in student financial aid are related to COVID-related student scholarships. Now, when we look all the way down, we see compared with our, are you at statement of net position? Okay, so I want to thank someone for working with me through this because I had many, many questions. And I asked him to come here today and I'm going to ask him to stand. And that is Brendan Lahane. Please stand. I'm a person who asks many, many, many questions. And Brendan is the person, I call him my budget guru. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to ask. Any questions about the statement of current funds, revenues, and expenses? So as you can see, overall, we've had an increase from FY '22 to FY '23 for the first quarter. Okay. Okay, now please scroll down to our statement of net position. And for those of us, well, I think most of us are familiar with in higher education, but in the corporate world, it's easy to understand this as the balance sheet. Okay, so scroll all the way down, please. We're looking at the total. So when we're looking at our statement of net position as of 9/30/22 and 9/30/21, you'll see a total net position increase by $105.4 million. Any questions about that? Okay, now let's scroll up. Oh, and I'm sorry, I did not add that the increase net position was due primarily to the unrestricted. Scroll back down, please. I'm sorry. Okay. So the increase is primarily due to an increase in unrestricted net position of 44.5 million and an increase in expendable net position of 61.4 million. And these increases are due primarily to COVID stimulus funding. Okay. Now let's go back up to the top, and I do apologize. Okay, let's look at our current assets. Look at our cash. We see an increase in cash between the 2 years of $1.8 million. Our non-current assets, you'll note an increase in restricted cash of 31 million. The increase in restricted cash is due primarily to the special appropriation for Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. Continuing down, statement of net position, note that the endowment investments decreased by 10.5 million, and other long-term investments decreased by 1.77 million. These decreases are due to declines in the overall market. Next is our net other post-employment benefit asset, increased by $34.7 million. This increase is a result of investment income and changes in assumptions by the actuary. Continuing down the statement of net position, we have a new line this year, and that's leased assets. And leased assets is now reported separately under GASB 87, which was implemented as of June 30th, 2022. And as you know, GASB 87 requires that leases be capitalized and reported on the statement of net position. Next, you'll see that capital assets decreased by $33.9 million. This is due to, number one, depreciation, retirements, and capital assets, which were reclassified from the capital assets line item to leased assets under the requirements of GASB 87. Also related to the implementation of GASB 87 are the changes that you will see for leases payable and notes payable. Leases payable decreased due to reclassifications from leases payable to notes payable, and likewise notes payable increased. Finally, we had significant changes in the pension and OPEB liabilities and related deferred inflow and outflow balances. The Kentucky Teachers Retirement Pension decreased by $9.6 million due to changes in actuarial assumptions. The Kentucky Employment Retirement Pension decreased by $72.7 million due to changes in proportionate share. And finally, the net OPEB liability, as well as balances and deferred inflows and outflows associated with both retirement systems, decreased due to changes in actuarial assumptions. Yeah. And also, I want to thank someone else because I asked many, many questions. And the person to whom I asked those questions is Melissa Hicks. I'm going to ask Melissa to stand, please. Are there any questions? Yes.
For a lay person here, what is a actuary, would you say it was again? Assumption?
Oh, Melissa, come right up. And she can enumerate all of those assumptions. Come right up. I have them written, but she can enumerate. Thank you.
Yeah. So the actuarial assumptions are just assumptions that go into the actuarial valuation. And it includes things like for your OPEB, it includes things like healthcare trend cost, inflation cost, salary increases, things like that. So, yeah.
I applaud the talent that we have here at KCTCS. They help me to help me. And so, again, I appreciate them. Any questions?
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a short break, 11 minutes. Thank you. Scott Tracy, you're up next. Excuse me, Hannah, we're gonna do the, Dr. Reese, right? Dr. Reese, I'm sorry, you're up.
Yes, correct. A little change in agenda.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much, Chair Stevens, members of the Board of Regents, Dr. Zarapata. Thanks for moving me up on the agenda. Unlike my president peers, apparently I was the only one invited to be a keynote in Atlanta this weekend, but I digress. Now, I'm here this morning on behalf of the WKCTC family, which includes the PJC, Paducah Junior College Foundation, and the West Kentucky Board of Directors, or dynamic faculty and staff, to ask for your support regarding the naming resolution of our Allied Health Building to the Barbara M. Veazey Health Building. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Veazey, who was the first president of WKCTC. I've been known her as a colleague now for at least half of those 4 decades that she spent at the college. I believe that Dr. Veazey is a case study, as we talked about leadership early, the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. 4 decades, incredible talent, and certainly she has donated significantly to the college. Let's briefly read the resolution, and then I'll leave it there because it captures the uniqueness of my colleague. So we had joint resolutions from our foundation and our board of directors, which reads, West Kentucky Community Technical College offers quality education in nursing and allied health programs, and WKCTC President Emeritus Dr. Barbara Veazey was instrumental in the establishment of the Allied Health Building and the development of healthcare educational programs at WKCTC. Dr. Veazey began her teaching career as a member of the College of Nursing faculty and progressed to positions of Nursing Department Chair, Dean of Academic Affairs, before becoming the first president of WKCTC upon the consolidation of the then Paducah Community College and West Kentucky Technical College, serving a 40-year career. As I remind her, I was just getting into high school. I digress. The last 14 years as president. Dr. Veazey forged relationships with the regional healthcare community that resulted in great financial and programmatic support for healthcare education at WKCTC, which continues today. And in addition to her direct affiliation with healthcare programs and the Allied Health Building at WKCTC, she has made extraordinary contributions to the college as a result of her work, dedication, and financial support over those 4 decades. Dr. Veazey continues to be a prominent member of both the greater Paducah area community and the state of Kentucky, being recognized locally throughout the state and nationally for her accomplishments. And whereas the Board of Trustees of Paducah Junior College and the West Kentucky Board of Directors is grateful to Dr. Barbara Veazey for the prestige, honor, and nationwide recognition she has brought to the college and for her extraordinary personal and professional support of our healthcare programs. So therefore, let it be resolved that the Board of Trustees and the Board of Directors hereby endorses a request by me as president of WKCTC to name the Allied Health Building on the campus of WKCTC the Barbara M. Veazey Allied Health Building in recognition of the significant support Dr. Veazey has provided to the college and the history of her specific work regarding healthcare programs. I would end saying that we concluded a year-long healthcare campaign for, as mentioned, the challenge of getting support for healthcare, particularly nursing and the allied health faculty. She was my first consult regarding that goal. We had a $3 million goal. We raised $3.67 million. All of that is a testament to the continuing legacy that she's provided for the college, and certainly has honed my appreciation and respect for many of you who are in the healthcare profession as well. And with that, I would conclude my ask, if you will, to you, members of the Board of Regents.
Dr. Reese, if a motion to accept this resolution and allow you to go forward is needed, I would with honor offer that motion.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second on the floor.
I will take roll. Chair Stevens?
Yes.
Vice Chair Martin?
Yes.
Secretary Fletcher?
Yes.
Regent Bogard?
Yes.
Regent Cox?
Yes.
Regent Finan?
Yes.
Regent Girdler, Regent Green,
Yes.
Regent Herding,
Yes.
Regent Jackson,
Yes.
Regent Rabinowitz,
Yes.
Regent Smith,
Yes.
Regent Witten.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We will be doing the official ribbon cutting October during National Healthcare Week in 2023. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. Scott Tracy?
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to come to give you a little bit of an update on the institutional advancement and college foundation for KCTCS. Didn't really want to give you a bunch of numbers in a report this year. I wanted to take a few moments just to tell you a little bit about the work that's been going on, give you a little bit more for those of you who don't know exactly what the foundation does and how it does its work, to give you an example of some of the work that we do, and then also give you a little bit of the vision that we have moving forward and some of the things that we want to accomplish in the next year. The foundation board itself is an independent board that has leadership from community members as well as some of staff in KCTCS system office and at the college level. What we do is serve as the primary fundraising arm for KCTCS to accomplish the goals and missions of the strategic plan, work with our colleges to make sure that we're providing services to students that we can on top of the work that goes on with the regular budget, well as do work to support our community partnerships, which is a large part of what goes on in the system. We have actually been lucky to have the support of our community members, but as well the importance of having Dr. Zarpata, Mr. Stevens, Dr. Linden on there in terms of their role to provide support and let us know what strategic action we should take as part of the foundation, to give us highlights of what you all are doing as the Board of Regents, as well as give us a perspective from the colleges that helps us inform the kind of work that we want to do and how we want to build out our initiatives. Right now, we only have 9 community members. So one of the big goals for us this coming year is to add another 4 to 5 members from the community and get those appointed on there. And a large part of that is because one of the things that has historically happened with this foundation board is that it's mostly been an advocacy board, but not as much of a fundraising board. So what we want to start doing is looking at changing the culture at the foundation level with the board and turning it more into a fundraising board where we're more actively engaged in the community and looking for things that we can partner with everybody throughout the system, throughout the colleges and their communities as well. So the board comes from across the state. It's not just a local board. So expanding that reach is one of the things that we really want to focus on. Relative to the role of the foundation and institutional advancement within the colleges, one of the things that the foundation allows us to do is to pursue projects that the colleges don't have the capacity to pursue. A lot of those are system-wide initiatives and opportunities that no one college could undertake. Examples of that would be like the project we have with Evolve 502, where any Jefferson County public school student can get a scholarship to attend any of the colleges within KCTCS. So we administer that through the foundation as a system-wide opportunity. The same thing with exometry scholarships, which you might have seen just recently, the press release that we did on that. That's a scholarship that provides pretty much almost full scholarships to machinists, engineers, technicians across the system for those colleges that have those programs in place. So we have several others that are like that where we are pushing those initiatives out. The other fact of the matter is some donors, especially larger nonprofit organizations, will only give to 501c3 organizations. And so that gives us a place to work at the system office level to push those initiatives and go for those funds, which we work with a lot of departments across the system office to do that, as well as within the colleges. Also wanted to give you a little bit of an update on our staffing because we're getting ready to be about fully staffed, which is allowing us to build back a lot of the things and look at doing some new initiatives as we get ourselves organized here for this next year. We literally just hired our first associate director of philanthropy, alumni engagement, annual giving. That's a lot of jobs in one person, isn't it? But that's pretty much going to be a focus that we're going to use with this person in place to start building the strategic plan going towards this fall. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the things that we're going to be working towards at that point to give you a sense of what that is going to look like for us moving forward. I wanted to also give you a couple of things that have been ongoing in this past year. And I really want to give kudos to Dr. Kay Yates, who's kept the ship going with barely any staff members and a skeleton crew, but has done a lot of large initiatives that have started to really take shape. And we want to build off some of those, including the transition to Blackbaud Razor's Edge, which is a customer relation database that we use to track all of our donor work, our projects, our funds, do reporting with the colleges, keep sure that we are maintaining contact with the donors at the right time. And it has been a rather large initiative to get that done. And we're still, even though we're in year 2, cleaning up some of the data that got migrated over. So we're doing that work as part of this to build out so that we can start communicating not only with our community members in the areas and our locals, but actually alumni as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But the other part of that package is an awards management system, which I have to give kudos to as well, because we've done the first phase of the awards management, which is allowing the colleges to receive more scholarship applications from students and match the students that are already in the system to the appropriate scholarships so that the colleges don't have to go and track them down and try to figure them out, because there's a lot of scholarships that have unique parameters that you just can't find the students to apply. Awards management second phase just began, and we had another 7 colleges that have started in the second phase to add awards management. So ultimately what that does is it matches the students that are already in the system to all the different scholarships that they're eligible for. A great example of how this is working is on the Kentucky Colonel's Better Life Scholarship. We have a lot of colleges in the last couple of years that haven't been able to make the awards of those scholarships because they couldn't get the student applicants. And one college in particular hasn't been able to make award for a couple of years. They were one of the first 4 colleges implemented, and they had 43 scholarship applications based on the matching in the system that they were not able to give out before. So a lot more than they have money for, but it's at least starting to put those kind of systems in place that will help us keep track of that. So we can keep track of who's getting the scholarships, how much money is left in the scholarships as they're making the awards, and make sure that it matches up and connects with what their financial aid packages are and doesn't overstep. So it's a really incredible system that's been implemented with a lot of work and not very many people doing it. So a really great job on that. And we're going to build off some of that work as we go and look forward. One of the things I wanted to talk about is kind of where that leads us to in terms of where we're headed. So one of the things that we want to do internally is to continue to build on the partnerships that have been put in place and have been ongoing for a long time in terms of working with the Chancellor's Office on different projects and programs that they want to do. Student support services. We're working right now with Jessie and her team on a program to do asset mapping, and we're looking at all the corporate relations that we have on the philanthropic side and trying to match up to make sure that there's a lot of entry points for corporations and working with the whole system and the different colleges. And so we want to make sure that we're in a place where we kind of know what everybody's doing with all of our corporate entities and make sure that nobody's stepping on everybody's toes and we're talking about the same things and we're not having different conversations with them at different times. So it's going to be a really useful tool of that. So working on those kind of things to build us across is a very important thing. The long-term thing that we want to look at is also alumni engagement. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is building a platform to really start doing alumni engagement across the colleges. And the platforms that we're going to be trying to look at will allow each college to develop their own platform for giving for alumni, doing engagement for alumni through the platform, And then one of those things that we want to attach that to is a KCTCS branded Give Day this coming fall. There's a lot of different Give Days out there. There's a lot of different opportunities for folks, and they're kind of, everybody's doing a little bit something different. So we want to kind of try to work on starting to build with the colleges a unique KCTCS branded Give Day, because we think philanthropically that makes sense for us in terms of not being connected to a bunch of different opportunities like one Give Day for Kentucky, and they're mixed in with a bunch of other people, but one branded Give Day that we can get everybody on board with that makes sense for KCTS and build some buzz. And that starts to help us also change that to where we have a culture of philanthropy, not only within the organization, but within the community, within our alumni that are going out into the communities as well. So those are the kind of things that we want to do. And we'll also look at employee giving across that board. One of the things that's been really important is to attach employee giving to those Give Days so that they kind of converge. So you basically kind of create a funnel for everything leading into one Give Day to create that initiative. And that's the kind of things that we're going to be looking to plan out for this coming year and get put in place. And it won't be everybody all at once, you know, how it'll be. Some colleges will come in and we'll do it. It'll build. So hopefully by the end of a couple of years, we'll really have all the colleges and all of our messaging and everything put together in a really secure place. And it makes a really unique branded Give Day that allows us to do a lot of fundraising that we hadn't been able to do otherwise. So those are some of the things that we want to really build on. You might ask, what might the role of the Regents be? I know in the past, you all probably are used to getting a little card at about this time to like make your gift if you want to be philanthropic to KCTCS. I'm not going to do that this time, because what I really want to do is also focus in this spring with Dr. Zarapata and talking to each of you all about your own philanthropic intentions and what's important to you about KCTS, and try to really find some way for you to be meaningfully involved as we build towards that Give Day. We're going to be working with our foundation board the same way. All the colleges are going to be working with their foundation boards the same way to try to really build a sense of uniqueness about what we're going to do. So it may take the form of different challenges that we provide on Give Day to offer to those folks that are going to give, so that they know they're going to get a challenge offer from the foundations board or the Board of Regents, and it's kind of doubling their dollars. And when we start building those kind of incentives into the kind of philanthropic initiatives that we're looking at doing, that really does make a huge difference. The last institution that I was at, we went from about 75,000 on the first Give Day to by the end of the fourth year, $1 million on Give Day. And most of that was because of the philanthropic intent of the boards that we serve that really put challenges together and individuals that step forth. So I do look forward to having those conversations with you to figure out, you know, there's a lot of things that are philanthropic in nature. It's not just dollars. So there's time, talent, treasure. Y'all are already doing a lot of that, but I think having intensive conversations about philanthropic intent for you guys and what you're comfortable with makes sense as we do the same thing with our foundation board. So any questions?
You mentioned the 403B or 403C. Which one are you? 503. I'm sorry, 503C. So are the other foundations for each of the colleges also 503Cs?
They are. Elizabethtown, actually, we have an agreement with them where we function as their fiscal agent. So they don't have a full 501c3 yet, but we work as their 501c3. So their funds and everything work through our office. But all the other colleges have those.
Well, the way you said it, I wasn't sure. I just wanted, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
I have a question.
Scott, this is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Karen, go ahead.
This is Karen Finan. I really appreciate this report. I think what we're hearing is a pathway and some tactics, some refreshed tactics that are very important to foundational giving. So I appreciate that. I know you chose not to throw a lot of data or numbers at us today, but can you give us just a quick overview of where we are on the giving level? Are we trending upward? Are we making progress? Do you have any concerns about where we are currently?
Actually, that's a really good question. I do have it. We are trending upwards. So for fiscal year 19, the foundation raised $217,000. Fiscal year 20, it was 1.1 million. Fiscal year 21 was 2.6 million and fiscal year 22 was 5.9 million. So we are trending upwards, and a lot of that has been because of some of those larger agreements like with Evolve 502, where they're building out an endowment to do some of this work, as well as providing other funds for ongoing work during the year as well. So there's a little bit of a combination of what types of giving are supporting that. But yes, we are growing. And so there's not as much concern. But anytime you have really large gifts like that, you do get concerned about what it looks like, because you have to fill that space the next year, because you're probably not going to get that same kind of a large gift. But that's the kind of things that we have to strategically look at and figure out who makes the next best sense. And that's one of the reasons why the asset mapping program and those kind of things are very important, because it gives us a way to look at the science and the art of fundraising. Basically, you know, there's a little bit of an art to that, but there's also a lot of science. And the Razor's Edge database that we have allows us to do a lot of the science in terms of looking historically at the types of donors who have made large gifts. What did it look like? The relationship, what did it look like with them before they made that large gift? And then we can identify, we have similar relationships with these other organizations. So if we put in plan a place to say, okay, these are the organizations we need to spend time with and really work up towards making those kind of large asks as well. So we do have some ways to do that, but it's always a nervous thing when you see a really large number that comes in for 1 year.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a very quick question, please, and that is because the foundation, obviously, we're inherently accountable for the funds that come as donations. And to kind of turn the asset map inward, is this money coming to a large pot and then it's distributed from this pot to various initiatives? And I'm thinking, because of Dr. Zarapata's buckets, are we separating this money strategically when it does come into these various pots? And are we providing an infographic for that to show if we raise 5 point so many million that actually went to students' success or organization or employee? You know, how are we differentiating that? And are we going to be able to document and track that for the accountability piece so that we can actually see how it contributes to the strategic plan that we have moving forward?
Absolutely. And I can share the annual report for the last fiscal year, and it breaks those down, because basically you have unrestricted funds, which kind of allow you to do whatever's the greatest need. And then you have restricted funds, which are specific to different types of projects. So we do have that broken down, that you can see where the money came from, what it's being used for, and kind of how it's broken apart. So I'd be happy to share that with you all.
Yeah, and I think some of that public facing would be really good, because sometimes people would be more apt to donate if they had a specific thing in KCTCS that they valued and loved. They're like, I want to donate $1 million. I wish I could.
Yeah.
To this particular area because I have a passion for that or whatever. And sometimes just to say, well, I'm going to give to a system entity, who knows what they're doing with my money. You know, the public doesn't necessarily want to do that all the time.
Right.
But very specific ways of giving and how to communicate that to potential donors and current donors, I think would be great if you don't already do that.
Absolutely. Well, being donor centric is one of the things that we really want to concentrate on. So at the same time, we have strategic initiatives that we want to make sure that we get accomplished. So when we communicate with donors, either en masse or when we're having individual meetings with folks that we're dealing with, we're always trying to gauge what it is that interests them and what they're passionate about, because that's what people are going to get involved with and really make a difference in. You know, there's a large difference between donating philanthropically because you feel you ought to, versus donating because you're passionate about something and you want to make a difference in the lives of somebody. So trying to find those points for different people and organizations is really something that we try to do as part of the whole system. So
it would be interesting on the asset map to really see that at the culmination of this, or sort of formatively as you go along, because that really shows us what Kentuckians value as well about where we spend our money and invest in higher education.
Absolutely.
So I'm anxious to see that.
We'll do that. Any other questions?
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Next item on the agenda, we have a report from Huron that's due in about 6 minutes. So we're going to move to another agenda item. The board has talked about in the past developing a policy on reserved benefits or carryover benefits. And I've asked Dr. Zarapata, he's going to talk very briefly, that this to be pulled from this month, quarter's agenda and be put back on so we can have some additional benefits, some additional information about whether it's a 3 or 5% carryover. Paul?
Yes. And so in attempting to benchmark what typical reserve levels are, what I have found is that there is no typical benchmark. So in Nebraska and Texas, where they're largely property tax funded, they carry as high as 45% in reserves. Louisiana, it's 2%. There are some states where if it goes over 10%, the state sweeps. And so because we are halfway through the budget year and we've got the study being initiated by Huron, this is one of the things that's in their sweet spot is to make these kinds of recommendations. I think it makes sense for us to wait for their feedback to come in before we decide to set a policy that may or may not work. I'd like to thank Buddy for working with the business officers on that. I know it's been a lot of work to dive deeper into that. Buddy, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that? Okay. Any questions?
And that will be put back on the agenda for the March meeting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm hopeful for is that we can have a policy to set reserves for the next budget cycle. So that would be FY24.
Any other questions in reference to that?
Just be moved.
It's just information.
Just information.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And we have in 4 minutes, Adam Fennell and Susan Basso from Huron will be joining us. Their intent is to do about a 10-minute presentation that's uploaded in onboard. And then they want to have 10 minutes or however long you all want to Q&A with them. So.
Pam?
I just wanted to clarify, Regent Jackson, you may be thinking about the original agenda as it was being planned. It was originally an action item. It was moved to information item last week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Stevens.
Okay, I guess we're waiting patiently. Ms. Duncan, do you want to?
I believe that we could go on to the Code of Ethics agenda item.
Thank you.
I think that's what
Ms.
Chair
Jackson?
Stevens was trying to get me to understand he was saying, but I was being dense. Okay, so I want to do this very quickly because you have had time to take a look at the Code of Ethics. It has been in your virtual workspace for a while now. If you recall, Regent Herding, Regent Jackson, Chair Stevens, Secretary Fletcher, Regent Hamilton, Hannah, and I. Is that it? Have I missed anyone? Went to the ACCT trusteeship conference in DC. Learned a lot, had a little bit of fun as well. So part of what came back from that was that we really needed to put into place a code of ethics for all of you. And so this is the Code of Ethics. It is modeled on the ACCT Code of Ethics. And basically it has discussion of what expectations are from you, that you should be civil, you should respect each other, you should be at all times loyal to this institution and to the board, you should put personal agendas aside, and it continues on. So I think you've all had an ability to read that. We also put into place a what happens if you end up basically violating this code of ethics. So let's say that Regent Green believes that Regent Herding has violated this code of ethics. What happens? Then basically remember that nobody on this board can remove anybody else on this board. The governor appointed the people who are on this board, and the faculty and staff elected the faculty and staff reps. The students elected the student reps. So there might be times when you no longer have eligibility. For instance, if you went from faculty to a staff role. But in this case, this is all about violating or living up to the Code of Ethics. And you would all have to take a vote
on whether that was violated. And really what would happen is that you could reprimand or censure someone. If you felt strongly enough about it, the only removal process would be going to the governor for appointed individuals. So we need to take a vote on this. Are there any questions before we move into a motion, a second, and a vote?
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Madam, call the roll,
I
please.
will call the roll. Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin.
Aye.
Secretary Fletcher.
Aye.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Cox.
Yes.
Regent Finan.
Yes.
Regent Girdler. Regent Green.
Yes.
Regent Herdink.
Yes.
Regent Jackson.
Yes.
Regent Rabinowitz.
Aye.
Regent Smith.
Aye.
Regent Witten. Aye. The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries. You now have a code of ethics. So go forth and act ethically. All right. The other action item that we have is a revision of officer and student election procedures. And I will say very quickly, the main two revisions for the officer elections was to put in place the special election. What will happen if a seat becomes vacant and we need to have a special election, but also to do what I am terming, and it may not be exactly point by point, but rank voting. So for instance, if you have 3 candidates for vice chair, then you would not need to go through yes, 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 no, 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 no for each of those candidates. Basically, what you would do is to have Regent Smith say the name of the individual that is his selection, Regent Green, so on and so forth. And then at that point, whoever reaches majority first would be the vice chair, the chair, or the secretary. The revision to the student election procedures is the same as well, the rank voting. Any questions on that? All right, we do need to vote on that as well.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
All right.
call the roll.
Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin.
Aye.
Secretary Fletcher.
Aye.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Cox.
Yes.
Regent Finan.
Yes.
Regent Girdler. Regent Green.
Yes.
Regent Herdink.
Yes.
Regent Jackson.
Yes.
Regent Rabinowitz.
Aye.
Regent Smith.
Yes.
Regent Witten.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries. We have revisions and, as promised, 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Madam Council. Paul?
Yeah, I don't know if have they joined us yet? Okay, great. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Adam Fennell and Susan Basso from Huron Consulting, who are going to be doing our resource and program optimization. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear us all okay?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful.
Take it away.
Very good. Well, appreciate it. You've got some materials there that are being shared with you. I am Adam Fennell, Managing Director in Huron's Higher Education Strategy and Operations Practice. I'm joined by my colleague Susan Basso, who will ask to introduce herself in a moment. I understand we have about 20 minutes with you, comprised of about 10 minutes of us presenting and 10 minutes of Q&A. Has that changed at all?
That works.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be prepared to do that. Hopefully, we'll have enough content in here to get through our sort of 10 minutes of presentation. Certainly encourage any and each of you to interrupt and ask questions as we go. Yeah, the hope is for us to just do a little bit of introducing ourselves and our firm, and then sort of walk through to some extent the project, its scope, its objectives and timeline, then a little bit of time to just give you a sense of how we view notions of systemness and how we're going to govern the work, and then we'll sort of talk about next steps. And with that, if we could just advance to the next slide, please. So before I introduce all ourselves and the team, wanted to give you all just a little bit of background on our firm and kind of where we come from. We were formed out of the sort of post-Enron Arthur Andersen disaggregation in 2002. Our outgoing CEO had started the higher ed practice at Arthur Andersen, I think in the mid-'80s. And so we have been at and the support of and working with universities and colleges for a fair bit of time. We've grown considerably. We're publicly traded. In the group that I just described is focusing on strategy and operations within higher education. There are about 200 of us covering a fairly broad part of the waterfront of university and college operations. And so, there are 10 folks on the screen here that comprise our team for KCTCS, but we have a significant and deep and broad bench to call on as and when any issues or questions arise that fall outside the direct areas of expertise amongst our group. I've been doing this sort of work with Huron for 15 years. I have done, no project that we do is ever truly identical, but we have done. I have led 40 or 50 of these kinds of projects across universities and university systems over that time period, and really look forward to getting to know your colleges and the system as a whole through the course of this work. Susan, would you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. As Adam said, I'm Susan Basso. I'm a principal with Huron. I serve with Adam on our strategy and operations team. My work at Huron is largely focused on organizational design, operating model, all things related to talent and change management. Prior to joining Huron, I served in higher ed actually for 30 years as the CHRO at 4 different institutions. Most recently, I was the Senior Vice President for Human Resources at The Ohio State University, and prior to that, the VP of Human Resources at Penn State. And in each of my roles, I led large-scale business optimization initiatives, including policy and process harmonization, operating model redesign, which included shared services implementation, and a number of other initiatives that led to the launch of cloud ERPs. So I'm really looking forward to this engagement and partnering with all of you.
Thanks, Susan. I won't, introduce the rest of the team kind of person by person. It's a phenomenal group. I'm looking forward to them having the opportunity to meet you and vice versa, and really for all of us to kind of get stuck into the work. And so with that, on the next slide, we wanted just to, before we get into the scope and objectives, just acknowledge that we understand there are some unique aspects of the work in front of us that really, I think, are a reflection of the unique aspects of your system and the colleges that comprise it. We understand this is a system-wide engagement. We are going to physically go to each of your campuses, try to do our best in the time that we have to understand their unique contexts, identities, cultures, et cetera, and make sure that we are truly partnering with the folks on the campuses so that this work is done in a collaboration rather than being done to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're organizing to do that in a moment. But wanted to pause here and just acknowledge those points, that this is the best version of these projects are truly collaborations amongst all of the parties and participants, recognizing that sometimes that can be a little bit messy just in terms of the coordination and the need to have significantly more engagement than if this were just done with a handful of us sitting at the system office, looking at data. But we think this produces the better sorts of outcomes, and so that's our plan. On the next slide, we'll get a little bit into the objectives and sort of scope. So there are 4 major sort of scope areas. One, looking at the use of physical assets, so space optimization, on each of the campuses. How is space used? How efficiently is it being used? How effectively, and so on. The second is a review of program offerings against employer needs. And we'll get into a little bit more of that and the specifics there in a few slides. The third is looking at the way in which resources are used and assessing to what extent both physical or financial rather and organizational assets are being deployed, quote unquote, optimally. And then the fourth, which is material, is looking at your compensation philosophy and classification architecture. Susan will be really on point for this one in particular. And you'll see in a moment as we go through the timeline that this one is a little bit more unique and has a longer time horizon in terms of delivery. Susan, anything to add on these at all?
No, thanks,
Okay,
Adam.
perfect.
I guess the one thing I will say is we launched the comp and classification and equity work for your faculty and staff positions. As you can probably appreciate, just because of the nature of compensation, we'll be very thoughtful initially to identify any risks and sensitivities before we even, launch into the work.
Thanks, Susan. So on the next slide, just a quick overview of the timeline. So this will feel very compressed. I'm still surprised we're in 22, let alone in December of 22. And so contemplating 23 is somewhat off-putting, but here we are. And so the first three work streams that I mentioned, so the ones that are not the compensation and equity study, will begin in earnest this year. And really run through the end of April of 23 with the comp study running for an additional, I think, 5 months or so into September. And we'll be developing a final report over that sort of March through September timeframe with, of course, engagement with the university leadership or system leadership and with you all presumably as we go throughout that period. So next slide. Please. Thank you. So just a little bit more on what comprises each of these areas of focus. So as I mentioned, under the sort of physical asset utilization work stream, we'll be looking at utilization on a campus by campus basis of the space that it has. This work will involve some degree of looking historically at the growth and changing of programs, relative to space and utilization. To some extent, we'll be looking at, cross-campus utilization, how are individual campuses performing and using space relative to each other to see if we can identify opportunities for, best practices and improve utilization throughout. Second work stream around academic program optimization, we'll be looking at, as we mentioned earlier, to some extent, the academic programs that are offered in the context of employment demands and what the market is looking for. We'll also be looking to build what we call a cost to educate model, which looks at the relative costs to deliver each program and look at those costs overlaid onto enrollment growth historically and use those data to inform a rich discussion around your academic offerings. The third work stream, looking at financial and organizational assessments, will be lots of interviews conducted, looking at the way in which you're organized, and trying to identify opportunities for increased efficiency, cost reallocation, or cost savings across the system. And then, of course, Susan, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the specific components here under the comp and class study.
Yeah, just to say, like the other work that Adam mentioned, our gaining an understanding of your current state will be an incredibly important aspect of the work. And in addition to all of the important quantitative data that we will gather about faculty and staff compensation, that will certainly tell one story, but we also want to use questionnaires and interviews to gather qualitative context to ensure our understanding of that data. So things like the impact of pay on your ability to attract and retain talent, the perceptions that folks have of career paths, equity and market relevance, and then also things like gaps and challenges in processes. And then we'll get into the details, you know, of the work where we're actually looking at job profiles, pay range structures, and then working with you to think about how to communicate and implement any changes.
Perfect. Thanks, Susan. In fact, that's a great segue to the next slide, which is, how are we going to organize to do this? So I'll point you to the right side of this, and then we'll come back to the left in a moment. When we do this kind of work broadly, it is, as I mentioned, really in partnership. We have a data request, and we'll be working through folks at the system office to collect as much sort of objective data as we can. But we will be doing a significant number of interviews, both at the system level as well as on individual campuses. We'll be doing focus groups that will largely comprise of cross-system representation as we get into particular topics. So bringing folks on campuses who have similar roles, to discuss topics, as we go. So this is, the work will be certainly very, integrated and informed by, as much as we can, what your colleagues on the campuses are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And so, our point of view will be obviously external, and we bring to bear, the experience of having done similar projects at dozens and dozens of institutions. And so we'll do our best to, through that lens, to study and get to know your campuses, and work with your colleagues to inform the work from a truly kind of local perspective. In terms of how we're going to organize and govern the work, the structure on the left-hand side shows how we're planning on doing that. We have executive sponsors that have been identified who will oversee all 4 of the work streams. We have 2 advisory committees, one that will cover the first 3, and then the second one that will focus on the compensation and classification, and then work stream leads for each of the work streams that will coordinate with us on a day-to-day basis, and help inform the work as it is being executed. And we have some project coordinators that will help just make sure that we're, having as light a touch on the campuses as possible, recognizing that your colleagues are all incredibly busy, and this work is being done in the context of, normal day-to-day operations. Folks aren't sitting around waiting for consultants to show up and ask them lots of questions. And so, we'll make sure that we're sensitive to those topics as well. Just one feature of the governance structure that I thought is worth highlighting is that all 16 campuses have representation somewhere in the project governance structure. So we've tried to build into the way in which this will be executed appropriate representation from across the system, just to sort of put our money where our mouth is and make sure that we're not just sort of talking about engagement, but we're truly creating a structure in which folks have an opportunity to contribute, engage throughout, and oversee the work that we're doing. And so, really where we are is about to begin the work. And so, we want to begin to kick off advisory committees, gather and analyze data, start to engage in interviews, and really, as Susan highlighted, do our best to understand what, the current state in the context of the state's history, understand, what are the unique aspects of the system in Kentucky? How do those aspects differ from what we're seeing from across the country? And really just, begin the work, begin the engagement in earnest. And so those are our next steps. It's I'm sure we could get more sophisticated than that, but candidly, this is what we're about to do is really kind of get stuck in. And with that, I think those are our prepared remarks. Hopefully it came close to the 10-minute mark. I wasn't keeping close attention, but certainly, Paul, welcome any questions that you or anybody else around the table has in us.
Questions? I know we have several, so let's somebody raise their hand, get going. All right, Joe?
For the class and compensation timeline, you mentioned that final report. Will there be any incremental reports before that 40 weeks is over?
Yes. That's simple. We will obviously be working with the advisory committee very closely. And, you know, particularly as if we discover anything that might seem, especially as we get into the equity analysis, there will be touch points all the way along, especially if we find issues that might be more emergent and things that we would want to make you aware of.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up to that, Susan, this is Paul. You know, I'm hopeful that we can get some guidance too. You know, while this study is going on, we'll have our traditional timeline for annual increases. And so that's got to get worked into this as well.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Green.
Yes, can you speak to the 40-week timeline and kind of describe why that's different than the other timeline with the 15-week? And then I have a second question about the job profiles. Can you talk about how far you're going to drill down into that? For example, we have the same title that's utilized different ways within the same college, you know, across colleges. So can you kind of speak to that as well?
Sure. Adam, do you want to take the first part and I'll take that part?
Sure. So the 15 versus 40, you know, really in our experience doing the kind of work that is comprised of within the 3 work streams that are 15 weeks, that work benefits from, I think, more intensive focus. And we're comfortable, being able to do the current state assessment, identify opportunities, and work through those work streams in a fairly expedited manner. I think, as you suggested, the nuance and what we are likely to see within the context of your current job classification structures just requires more time. And Susan, if you want to talk about why sort of 40 weeks and kind of go from there, that might be helpful.
Sure. So with the comp and class work, right, we want to be extremely thoughtful. This is incredibly sensitive work. It really matters to employees. And so we really want to be thoughtful and get all of the work right. Regarding the question about the profiles, yes, we will be doing deep dives into the profiles. So for staff positions in particular, leading practice job classification systems really focus on categorizing work by both function and level. And those are the things that will help support learning and development, performance management, and career progression. So we will be developing a detailed job architecture for you that will, confirm job families. So do things that like identify similar jobs that share a body of knowledge, develop career ladders, map current titles, and then propose titling standards and conventions. And so I totally get the comment about, titles that are used across the system. One of my favorite things always in higher ed is we just have a lot of program coordinators, lots of analysts, and those aren't titles that really define very well what a body of work is. And so we will be working with you to help redefine all of that.
Thank you very much.
This
Next
is
question.
Yes, this is Regent Fletcher, and I'm one of the people who went to bat with the legislature to get this project approved. And one of the ways that I think we were successful in getting that done was by assuring that the legislature was going to be able to see a return on investment. And my question has to do with, in each of these areas, for example, in the space utilization study, when you make a recommendation, will you also be providing us with a return on investment if that recommendation is carried forth? This board loves data, and I think that's one of the things that will help us to be able to budget appropriately in the future, as well as make sure that we are putting resources where they need to be. Same with academic programming. Can you, as you make those interval reports or those final reports in each of these areas, give us that return on investment data or prediction?
Yep. So we'll do our best to not only quantify opportunities that we identify, but also insofar as there is an investment on your part to earn those efficiencies, quantify those investments in order for you all to make informed decisions around which ones you wish to pursue, wish to forego, and so on. I mean, typically what we see out of work like this is that we may identify 20 to 60 significant opportunities, not all of which you would elect to pursue. And typically we advise our clients to think about a portfolio of projects, some of which are perhaps smaller in magnitude, but also more likely to easier to achieve, and some that are larger in magnitude, but perhaps may take 2 or 3 years to realize in order to both show some progress in the short run, but work towards substantive and meaningful, change and transformation, over a longer sort of time horizon. But this is, these are the kinds of conversations once we figure out where there are opportunities, that we would work through with the advisory committees and with the executive committee, and then presumably some of the things that would float up to you all as you're getting insight into the work and its outcomes.
Thank you for
One-
that. The other thing that was very important to the legislature was that we do appreciate the unique qualities of each of the 16 colleges, and making sure that is not impacted in a negative way with not only the study, but the outcomes as well. And so while we're all about efficiency and improving things, we want to do that across the system. We also want to maintain the integrity and the community relationships of those colleges within their local areas. So I really appreciate the soft touch approach. Adam, you had said in one of our meetings in the committee that, you don't want to be seen as suits on campus. And I really appreciated that. And I think that really will serve everyone well to know that you're there to be helpful. You're there to, dive into the data and help them come up with these recommendations, and that they are a part of the recommendations. This is not someone coming in and shoving things down from the top, but helping them to flesh them out from within. So I really appreciate that approach. And Susan, several of the comments that you made in our committee meetings really sold me on this. So again, thank you all for being here, and I appreciate the information today.
Our pleasure, and I really appreciate those comments. It may seem hokey, but we do really deeply care about what you all do and what your colleagues on campuses do, and we're looking forward to playing a small part in helping advance their work.
Regent Finan.
Thank you. Adam, I guess this question is for you. Given the comprehensive nature of this study, how do you handle change in direction, just conflicting information? I'm assuming you're leaning heavily into the advisory committee for their direction. Can you speak a little bit to how you manage this, and how much, control the advisory committee would actually have?
Yeah, thank you. So each circumstance is a little different. But what we do is, or typically is, ask you for a lot of data, review and understand and analyze those data insofar as we can, and then we'll engage with the appropriate folks, presumably in this case of the advisory committee, to share with them our understanding of the data and our analysis and assessment, and get them to push back or provide their perspectives and reactions and so on. And then typically what we do is have a few iterations back and forth, right? Do we understand this this data correctly? If we may make a conclusion around a certain set of data that turn out aren't correct because we didn't have the full context, and so we will then sort of course correct and sort of go from there. We don't always agree 100% with advisory committees or even executive committees, and we do our best to maintain some degree of independence. But we also acknowledge that that's okay, and you all may elect not to do something we think is a great idea, and that's absolutely fine. And so I think, having done this kind of work for 15 years and done work at our clients after these kinds of projects. It's I know we use the word collaboration a lot, but really, it is collaborative. I mean, we have a deliverable to get to and a timeline to work against, and we do our best to work in concert and closely with in this case, the advisory committee and presumably the executive committee. So there aren't any surprises as we go. And if there is a need to course correct, we will do that course correction. I mean, I think our abiding interest is in, you all having the information you need to make the decisions you want to and need to make out of this work.
I have one more question, Adam. This is Regent Fletcher again. So if you are asking for data and there is no data in that particular area, in one of those areas I've already talked with Dr. Zarapata about, a year or so ago, year and a half ago, we were given a snapshot of an estimate of space utilization on the various campuses. And so I noticed that was one of the uploads that you had requested already was, that data. If that data doesn't truly exist or in the form that you would use it in, how would you go about collecting that data to assure that the information you're getting is accurate?
So great question. So, we've certainly faced that. We did a space optimization study at the University of Colorado Boulder, and they didn't have many of the data that we needed. And so we had to work with them to figure out how to triangulate, right? They didn't have, data in terms of who was in what office, for example. And so that we had to figure out, all right, well, how might we go about getting that data? And so what we ended up doing was going to IT and identifying, which IP addresses were associated with which offices, and then trying to match individuals to IP addresses and sort of effectively back into a database of who was in what office in order to figure out how effectively space was used around administration, for example. And that's just, an example. We do our best to try to come up with a next best alternative. So if the data doesn't exist, is there another way to get to the data? Just describe one of those. So that's one strategy. A second is, can we triangulate, right? Can we use other data to and approach the problem from multiple different directions to try to get a sense for, a reasonable error range, around that particular point.
And Adam, this is Paul. I can jump in there. I can appreciate that. I think your IT example right there, that makes a lot of sense. And I look at our phones. We've got phones mapped to people all over the system as well. And that's another way that we can get that room data.
Yep. And look, I mean, doing that work at CU, there were like 8% of the classrooms were in the, officially in the registrar's database. It said C department, right? So we couldn't calculate, room utilization for a fairly material portion of their instructional space. And so what we had to do was go and see the department, right? We went and just sort of did the legwork to kind of figure out what was being done in which rooms and whatnot, just to try to get a sense for, what the data look like. So, we're fairly, we've seen a lot of different data environments, some better than others. And, certainly we regularly have perspectives on data definitions, master data management, data governance, et cetera, that come out of these kinds of projects to try to help you all not have to go through similar exercises in future studies, right? So, where can you make improvements now so that you all, leadership, management, and the board have more and better quality data, with which to do your work as well.
Is there a cap on the contract fee at that point if you're having to do additional footwork or there's a change order per se? How does that impact the bottom line?
So typically we figure it out within the four bounds of what you have, what we have in our contract now. I mean, if there's a circumstance in which you all literally don't have floor plans and that space work can't be done, and you might need to bring in a contractor to go in and use LiDAR or whatever to go in and recreate CAD drawings and so on. That's truly outside the scope of what any of us had contemplated at the beginning of this. Then we would talk to you about what that might look like. But we do try to do the work within the sort of the four corners of the contract that we have.
I really see that more from a life safety perspective and a risk management perspective of, do we know who's in the building at any given time? God forbid, in the event of an active shooter or something, that we know who's there or who should be there, and have we accounted for everyone and those kind of situations. So when you make recommendations on space utilization, it's not just going to be about, you know, you have too many classrooms or not enough classrooms or not enough labs. It's going to also kind of encompass that risk management piece as well, correct?
100%. I appreciate
Okay.
you raising it. Those are, issues that we've raised at other clients as well. Certainly, I think it's immensely important and certainly something that, from a duty of care perspective, certainly think that's important for us to highlight.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
Dr. Zarapal, I don't know if this is for you or this might be better directed to Adam. So just for the employees watching today, can you talk about the makeup of the advisory committee? And then also kind of secondarily, the next steps, the facilitating interviews and focus groups between system and college leadership, that makeup of those folks.
So those teams are posted on the Huron project site. I don't have a list with me right now, but you can see all 16 colleges in the system are represented. Project is moving forward. Got the first data request yesterday, so I've been talking with Chris Howes and others here on getting that data pulled together. We've got the kickoff calls scheduled for next week and the week after. As far as when the site visits will happen, I'm not sure yet. That's going to be coordinated through Cindy Ackley and probably Amy Jennings over here with the local colleges, and that will be communicated to everyone. I don't know exactly what the cadence will be when they are on campus, but more information to come on that.
Will those meetings be televised or streamed? We've talked a lot about transparency in this project, how everyone will hear the same information at the same time. If legislators were interested in, watching the stream or not participating in the meetings, but seeing those meetings, like
they'll be recorded. We're planning on recording them and posting them on the site.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do any of the college presidents have any questions? Please come forth if you have any questions. I have a question in reference to your recommendations. We're halfway through the fiscal year. And basically, I think in March or in the spring, colleges start talking about faculty programs that need to be worked on or so. And then the board starts talking about finances, pay raises, and of those. So my question is, as you give these reports, I would assume your findings, what we call the low picking fruit, the stuff that's easy for us to do is what I'm saying is. So, but would you be able to give us a timeline if something major is proposed that you would recommend down the road would you be able to say, this is something you already need to look at, but it may take you all a year, 2 years or something to do that?
Yes.
Any other questions? Paul?
No, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Susan. We'll see a lot more of you as this project advances.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be with you all today and enjoy the rest of your
Looking
day.
forward to it. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right, bye now.
Internal audit, Christopher? From Dean Dorton?
My name is Chris Boylan. I'm with Dean Dorton. I am manager of internal audit. Lance could not be here today. He's the director on this project. He's met with you all before. But I am the point person on most every audit we have other than the IT audits. So I'm very familiar with the entire report and we'll be presenting it for Dean Dorton today. That said, start with the executive summary. The executive summary page lists the audits we completed in this report. We still have that. We're in the second quarter. We still have some of our second quarter audits going on. So I'll discuss that as we get down to the remaining schedule for the year. But we did an audit on FISAP reporting, Maysville Community and Technical College, Henderson Community College, and then IT has been busy with access controls, user awareness training, recovery, recovery planning, IT governance and risk assessment, and then protective technology, log retention and storage. So that I'll dive into some of the to the next page. It summarizes our findings on these in these areas. We had very few findings in this reporting period. We had one low risk finding on Maysville and another low risk finding on Henderson. IT surprisingly had nothing, which is a good thing. So I'll kind of hit the strengths and key steps on each one. I won't dive too much into some of these since they really were very clean audits this quarter. So on the FISAP reporting, we obtained an understanding of the process and then agreed the information for each college and supporting information. We found that the people who worked in this area were very knowledgeable. The report had no findings. So overall, very clean audit. Maysville Community and Technical College, we were asked as part of the audit plan to step in and perform this internal audit with the change in presidency recently. So I think that's common practice for internal audit to go in after a change in president. And so this was on our audit plan for the first quarter, and the report overall was another very good audit for Maysville. We found they had a very mature internal control process over cash handling. Pro card activity selected for testing. We did not find any issues there. The departmental budgeting process, we reviewed that in detail. It included explanations for the use and requested funds, and process appears to be very well organized at Maysville compared to some of we've only been to a handful at this point, but I would say their process is very well organized. So overall, very good internal controls for Maysville. The one finding we had related to bank reconciliations. They had some bank reconciliations that were completed after the 20th of the month, which is a policy or falls under the procedures for bank recs. They were not signed off by the 20th. They were signed off a few days later. We went back and tested a few more and found the same thing. So we made the recommendation that they just perform some education and training around that area. And that has already been completed as of today. So it was completed on November 8th. So with that, I'll jump over to Henderson Community College. Henderson was also a very clean audit. They share some functionality with Madisonville that I think is starting to split away. So, but with that, I think they've gained a lot of strengths in their internal controls through the experience at Madisonville. Currently, it consists of 3 employees, and that they're fairly new staff as a whole. One of these employees did come over from Madisonville, which is I would say a plus for the department. The handling of cash is limited, as I think it is at most of the colleges currently. Most everything's gone to electronic, and that's processed through the system office. Cash accounts appear to be reconciled timely, and the money has been swept down to the maximum allowance of $5,000 in the accounts. And let's see. Oh, their pro cards, they have pulled back in most of their pro cards and have taken themselves down to 2 pro cards. So the risk of pro card issues at that college is fairly low after that change. So I do think that's definitely worth noting. And then they also have regular monthly meetings to review their budget, the actual information with their personnel. So I would say that both the colleges we visited this go round, it was very, very smooth, and both of them had good controls. Our one finding at Henderson was related to they did not have a policy procedure manual for this specific to the school, like we've seen at some of the other ones, that included a signature form acknowledging receipt of the financial policies and procedures. I don't see that as a major finding, but they did go ahead and put together a form of acknowledgement, had their employees sign it, and that was completed on November 7th. So they completed that almost immediately when informed. I'm not going to touch too much on the IT area. It is not my area of expertise. We have IT auditors at Dean Dorton that specifically handle our IT audits. I was impressed that the IT audits came back clean. I think, in today's technology, cybercrime day and age, it's impressive that we had no findings, and a very positive sign for KCTCS. I'm not 100% sure what they'll find. I know we have a lot planned in the IT area, and we'll touch on that in just a few minutes going forward. Next area, we like to do a follow-up on our findings that have not been implemented yet. Rarely do we have findings that are implemented prior to the report being issued like we did this time. So follow-up from prior audits, prior audit action plans. We had 4 issues in the system office and 4 issues in IT that were still out at action plans that were approved. And of those, 4 had been completed for the system office. Everything in the system office had been completed. On the IT side, 3 of them had been completed. 1 is not yet due. So the one that is not yet due is on page 17 of our report. It's is that right? Page 18 of our report. I'm not sure what page that falls under here. Oh, our page numbers are on the bottom. So on page 18 of our report, we had one IT control finding that involves disaster recovery. They are working on that one currently and is supposed to be implemented by the end of January 2023. So all of our other prior findings have been remediated at this point. So with that, I will jump over to the internal audit plan and what remains for the rest of this fiscal year, and our plan to get started for the next risk assessment, which will start in April. So for Q1, we have completed the audits that were listed for Q1. In Q2, we have performed and completed 2 of our planned audits for this quarter. That was the FISAP in Henderson. Human Resources I-9 audit is ongoing and close to completion. We have ProCard audit that is ongoing. That is a follow-up audit to last year's ProCard audit. So, and it will involve hopefully a summary of the testing period a little bit from the new program that was implemented to help monitor ProCards. Then we have the leases audit that is ongoing as well. For Q3, we will be starting up in January. We have another human resource audit on hiring, termination, and status change procedures of employees, a personal service contract audit, student financial aid audit, and then we will be going to Jefferson Community and Technical College. We're trying to hit 1 college every quarter. And over the course of a 4-year period, we will have made it to all of the colleges and hopefully not overwhelmed each of our college business offices with us showing up on a routine, regular basis every year. So if there's any changes or any need to jump out to a college, though, during the course of the year, we will make that adjustment and add it into the audit plan. And in Q4, we will perform a capital projects audit. and Western Kentucky Community and Technical College audit. That we will also start in April, our risk assessment plan for next year, risk assessment and audit plan for 2024 fiscal year. On the IT side, so they have several audits remaining. They've completed their Q1 audits, all their Q2, they are still showing as in process. Q3 and Q4, I can go through those, but it's quite an extensive list, and so they are working on that as we speak. Does anybody have any questions for me on this audit report this quarter?
Any questions for Christopher?
I'd just like to congratulate Chris and his team. To have no IT findings is pretty crazy.
Thank you. Jennifer Williams. External audit.
Good morning. We're glad to be here with you today. My name is Mary McKinley. I'm a partner with Forvis. I have with me Jennifer Williams, a director at Forvis. And just for your knowledge, Forvis is a new name for us. We recently went through a merger June 1st, and we were formerly BKD. You may have heard of us, and in that realm. We are now Forvis. We are the 8th largest CPA firm in the country. And so we have a lot of resources and availability to help KCTCS. We're certainly glad to be able to serve such a large system. And this is our first audit with KCTCS. So we do appreciate all the help, especially this year and this first year, that we received from the KCTCS team. So big shout out over this way. Thank you. So I heard that your agenda is fairly full. The good news for us is that good news from audit results is very easy to give succinctly. So we will do that. And Jennifer is here to be able to start highlighting for you what we have already visited with the audit committee about, and we'll share those results with you.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks the board for allowing us to be here today to present the results. So as Mary noted, we did present this to the audit committee last week. And so I will just go over a high level of those results. So I have the audit results, a few financial statement highlights, the audit committee letter that was presented to them. And then if you have any questions, please interrupt me or stop me at the end. So on the next slide, oh, thanks, Ann. Great. So on this slide, again, just the audit results, we accomplished an audit plan and timeline. So as Mary noted, this was the first year with Forvis. So again, just want to give big kudos to the team here. We have a lot of questions. We have to get to know the system and everything. So thanks, Buddy, Beverly, Melissa, David, and Leslie, who were phenomenal to work with, helped answer all our questions and gave us the information so that we would be able to meet the deadline to the state and be able to present to you today. So we did issue an unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements. You will note there is an emphasis of matter for the adoption of GASB 87. As Beverly touched upon, that was a new standard that was required to be adopted. And so that is reflected in the June 30 financial statements. One other item to note as you look at those financial statements, generally they are comparative due to the adoption and the way that GASB statement was written. It is a single year presentation. So it's not unusual that it's single year. That was just due to the date of the adoption was July 1st of 21. So you didn't have to go backwards to restate and look at all those leases. So really, that was the only reason that those are not comparative. The other good news, as Mary mentioned, is there's no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls over financial reporting or on the compliance noted there. And as I mentioned, we did adopt GASB 87, and Beverly touched upon that, where that new line is for the leased assets compared to the capital assets. So over to the next two slides, the financial highlights here. So just a couple items to highlight, net tuition from 21 to 22 was slightly down. Again, we see that just with coming out of the pandemic and the impact in the students and that fluctuation. So nothing unusual there. The net position is very strong at 960 million there. And then an increase in state appropriation. So that funding that is coming from the government there. On the next slide shows a summarized financial highlights here. I know this is probably fairly small here, but just a couple items to note is there has been increase in cash for capital projects. So we reviewed that information as well as the COVID funds. So again, the HERF money has still come in, and so we looked through that spending of those funds. In addition, the post-employment benefit asset did increase to about 34 million. So that is a couple of the factors that are showing the increase in the total net position. The other impact is the pension liability is down for 22. The next slide just shows some highlights on the statement of revenues and expenses. So again, as I mentioned, and as Beverly reported, the increase in the COVID funding from the CARES, from ARP, still have that money coming in, and there is still some funds that are being expended in fiscal year 23. And again, it shows the operating revenues there and the operating expenses. So that is shown there about a slight decrease in the operating revenues and an increase in the operating expenses. However, those are offset by the non-operating revenues and the way the governmental standards are. Those state appropriations and all those are shown kind of below the line, what we say in the non-operating. On the next slide, just some financial statement footnote highlights. There is a new note 5. There's a new table in there for the leases. So you now see the leased assets compared to the capital assets. And then also, as Beverly mentioned, there is a disclosure of notes payable. So the term capital leases is kind of gone now with 87. And so those are just notes payable. What we kind of talk about is just geography. The name really changed based on that standard. We did do the financial statement audit as long as the single audit. So the highlights there is we did have no compliance findings and no internal control findings there. The major programs that we were required to test were the Student Financial Assistance Cluster, the Education Stabilization Fund, where the HERF funding is, Perkins 5, and the Coronavirus State, Local, and Fiscal Recovery Funds. Some of those are required by the government as they do dictate. Some of those are high risk, the coronavirus. So a lot of that COVID money, they did say that was high risk. And so depending on the dollar amount, you generally have to test that funding. So in the audit committee letter, the highlights there on the next slide. So as I noted, we did issue an unmodified clean opinion on the system's financial statements. On the next slide, we talk about the significant accounting policies. So again, as I discussed, the GASB 87 was adopted during the year. There were no unusual matters to report, no unusual alternative accounting treatments that were noted. The next slide shows the management's judgments and accounting estimates. So these are just inherent in the financial statements. And so we pay particular attention to these to see if there's any management's bias or any impact into these estimates. And so we look at the valuation of the investment securities, and we look at the actuarial assumptions. I know that was asked earlier. And then we look for those actuarial assumptions that go into that benefit plan, pension plan number, and the post-employment number that is on the financial statements. We also look at the allowance for uncollectible receivables, as that is an estimate as well. And so if we need to look at that to see if there's any bias in that estimate. And there were no matters to note with those items. On the next slide, it just talks about the financial disclosure. So those are just some high level items there that are noted in the financial statements, the alternative investments, the post-employment benefit plan, and the long-term disability plan, GASB 87, and then the higher education emergency relief, the HERF funding as well. There were no audit adjustments noted in the financial statements, and then there were no past adjustments. A past adjustment would be if we had identified something that management had not determined was material, and we would pass and not record that in the financial statements. There was one in the prior year, so we had looked at that as new auditors, and so there was the turnaround, what we call the turnaround impact of that, but we didn't identify anything in the current year. On this slide here, there were no unusual matters to report in the quality of the system's accounting policies. We did have a management representation letter that was provided to management to sign in the release of the audit report. And then there were no significant items discussed with management during the audit process. And then one item that we did note as a deficiency was internal control over compliance. So in the testing of the HERF reporting, there are information that has to be uploaded to the website. And so when we were able to obtain that, however, there was not sufficient or lack of retaining the information that was posted to the website. So we just recommend that as that information gets posted to the website, make sure you take a snapshot of that Excel file or just different information. So if asked why that was the number that was posted, that you have that there as support readily available. So again, we were able to obtain that to support the numbers that were posted on the website. It was just looking at those reports in which were run. And it happens because it's at a point in time, many times with how many students are enrolled in different items like that. So that was just an item of a recommendation by our team. And with that, those were all the prepared comments I had for you today. Any questions?
That was the only question that I had as I went through that. That was in that October 6th letter, page 4. So when you say take a snapshot, because it is a snapshot in time, do we have a mechanism for archiving day-to-day data on that, since that is something that has to be looked back at?
Yes, they have a process. It was, I think, the magnitude of the volume of the student data, and Buddy and Leslie, please chime in if I'm misspeaking, but again, it was the magnitude of the data. And so keeping those Excel files that were just showing how many students were awarded funding, I think was just a magnitude of that process. But they do have a normal process of retaining the information. So when we needed other reports for different items, we were able to obtain those reports.
Okay, thank you.
And we also had, I think Buddy reported that we have about $8.5 million left of COVID money that we have to be spent before the end of 2023. And so, with that, any other questions for the auditors? I do need a motion.
I do have one other question, not
Okay,
necessarily
yeah, go
for
ahead.
it. So of the 303 million that has been spent so far out of those funds, and the 8 million you said is left, is there a way for us to get just kind of a snapshot summary of like the appropriation of that pool of money, where it has gone? Like,
I don't know about the amount, but Buddy sent me yesterday, the day before, all the categories that this money went for. We can give you that.
oh, great. Yeah. So if it's already there, that'd be perfect. Could you share that?
Yeah, and I don't think, but he had, a long list of where all the money, student reimbursement, teacher reimbursement, supplies, and everything like that. Yes. And he'll be glad to send that to all the board members. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And that was required to be posted online. So that was one of the items we were looking at to see those pieces.
Thank you all. I
Yes.
appreciate the thorough report.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Duncan.
We do need a motion and a second to accept the external auditor's report.
Your motion?
I make a motion, to accept the.
Second?
Second.
I'm sorry, and roll call. Chair Stevens,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Martin,
Aye.
Secretary Fletcher,
Aye.
Regent Bogard,
Yeah, aye.
Regent Cox,
Yes.
Regent Finan,
Yes.
Regent Girdler, Regent Green,
Yes.
Regent Herding,
Yes.
Regent Jackson,
Yes.
Regent Rabinowitz,
Aye.
Regent Smith,
Aye.
Regent Witten.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries.
Dr. Sarapati had a comment?
Yeah, not for you all. Thank you very much. The third piece of the audit committee meeting was a review on financial ratios, which was primary reserve ratio, a viability ratio, return on net assets ratio, and a net operating reserves ratio. That presentation is uploaded onto Onboard. It was given for a single year. We have asked for a 5-year look back from Melissa Hicks so that we can see that you know, what happened through COVID and what happened before COVID. I think that's going to be much more meaningful. That'll get presented at the next audit committee meeting. That meeting was also recorded if you want to go back and watch it on YouTube.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. We'll take about a 5-minute break. Maybe we'll go into 10 minutes.
Okay, I think we have,
Chris is somewhere in the building. Wandering around. Oh, there he is.
Who?
right there. I'm sorry.
Kelly.
Did she leave?
She did.
Okay.
So that we were gonna, so for the record, Kelly Rabinowitz had to leave. We had a quorum before. We continue with a quorum.
This is an action item.
Yep.
Next Tuesday.
So the first thing I'd like to present as the first action item are some 403B enhancements. So the first thing we'd like to do is move to a 1-year cliff vesting. And this was actually a recommendation from our HR peer team. So they actually talked through the different options and they voted on this particular piece. The second is defining a break in service as 6 months. This is another benefit to our employees because if you leave and come back to KCTCS and it's within a 6-month period, you'll pick up your vesting is where, or you'll pick up your time of service for your vesting is where you had left off. And the third one, we worked with Dr. Williams and the CAOs, and this is the 30-day waiver. And this is really implementing this to prevent in-service distribution violations. Our plan tells us we have to have a bona fide break in service or bona fide coming back to work for retirement. So what this does is if an employee leaves, they have to not be employed with KCTCS for 30 days before it allows them to take a distribution from their retirement plan. But it also allows us the flexibility to bring back some adjunct professors if we need to as well. So those are the 3 enhancements. Any questions?
Lynn, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we know how, if and how this impacts the budget?
There is no impact to the budget on this.
Joe. Okay. No impact to the budget.
What was the previous vesting period?
It was a 5-year cliff vesting, which is pretty unusual for a 403B. Typically, you'll see that in pensions, but not the 403Bs. Absolutely.
I would say you've got a great opportunity to say, we heard you and made the change.
Well, actually, I'm working with Mary over there. We're actually going to send a communication out to all of KCTCS because it's exactly some of the feedback we got from the benefits survey. Thank you.
All right, this is an action item. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin. Secretary Fletcher.
Aye.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Cox.
Yes.
Regent Finan.
Yes.
Regent Girdler. Regent Green.
Aye.
Regent Herding.
Yes.
Regent Jackson.
Yes.
Regent Smith.
Aye.
Regent Witten.
Aye.
All members present have voted aye. The vote carries.
Thank you. Lynn, next item is yours. also.
Yes. These are the personnel actions. So just a few things to point out here. So again, Dr. Zarapata talked about Jesse Shook is one of our administrative appointments. We also had Danielle Sawyer as an administrative appointment. There's a lot of detail here. The only other thing that I would point out is currently we have 64 faculty position open and 123 staff positions. Other than that, I don't have any updates. I think there's a lot of information in the personnel report, so we could move to vote on this as well unless there are any questions.
Questions?
Motion to accept?
Motion, second?
Second.
Roll call, Madam.
Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin. Secretary Fletcher.
Aye.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Cox.
Yes.
Regent Finan.
Yes.
Regent Girdler. Regent Green.
Yes.
Regent Herding.
Yes.
Regent Jackson.
Yes.
Regent Smith.
Yes.
Regent Witten.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. The next item on the agenda is presented by Beverly Malone in reference to the PowerPoint of East and West Fire Commissions. And with that, we'll do that, and then Council Duncan will call the roll of reference to the project.
Good afternoon. The KCTCS Board of Regents must approve all projects, construction projects valued at more than $1 million. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the Office of Facilities and Support Services decided to divide the fire alarm upgrades into two sections for the colleges located on the east side and colleges located on the west side. The project scope was valued at $999,000. However, during the design phase, the architects identified an increase to $1.6 million. Now, the difference is being funded through the Asset Preservation Fund and then through the agency restricted funds. And this is for the East colleges and the West colleges. And so if
would you please give an explanation? I know you told me why it's divided in East and West and why you did it that way.
And that's why I have.
Yes,
facilities
yes, sir.
director.
The current construction market also affects the design market. And so the availability of large firms that could handle a system-wide evaluation of our fire alarm systems and to design upgrades is limited. So by separating it into two, we did several things. First of all, we opened the ability for other smaller firms to be able, that were still qualified, to be able to present, a chance to have those projects and for us to award. We awarded to two different firms. And so we were able, there's a lot of field work involved, even though we started off the project saying that we knew certain fire alarms needed to be upgraded. And then we built in a little contingency for some others. They still had to go look at every single building, every single fire alarm. And in doing so, they've, upped the number that we actually need to do. But this allowed that to happen faster because we had two different firms, each focused on a different part of the state doing it. That's the only reason it was divided into two.
I have a question, and maybe it's premature, but with Huron coming in to do the space utilization study, do you think there's any chance that any of these projects that are going to be updated would be something that would not be utilized after that study was completed?
Well, right now we're just in the beginning of the design phase. We're in phase A. So it's going to be several more months, probably past April, before we identify the drawings in order to go ahead and go out for bid. So what we would do if we had a building that we were taking offline, we could just remove it from the project.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
So going to, there's a couple other slides, but this is not just the fire alarms, but in some cases, because when they did the investigation, they determined some other things with the fire alarm system that had to be upgraded in order for it to work. That's part of why the scope increased. We had some additional fire alarm panels that needed upgrading. We had some additional systems. So we're up doing all that, to make them safe. So even in some cases, if we decided we're going to rid ourselves of an asset, we would still probably have to bring the fire alarm system up to speed in order to sell the property. We would determine that before we, proceeded on. We wouldn't upgrade a fire alarm that we didn't need to.
Okay, next slide, please. So it's the same for the colleges located in the east and the colleges located in the west. Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy that they both came up. They were both 999,000 and now they're at 1.6. But since we divided the colleges in half, we ended up with basically the same number of things that had to be done on each side. So projects seem mirroring each other, but they're really different. The numbers were come to in a different way.
Okay, so that's for the fire alarm upgrades. Next slide, please. That was the rationale. So the next slide is the fire commission. You can go and speak to that.
Right. This is the National Response Prevention Center. It's in RPC is what I call it. It's in I want to say Glendale, but that's because I have something else in my mind. But it's down near Wendell Ford. It's right across from Wendell Ford Training Center. This property was an abandoned mine land area that was refilled, and then we acquired the property after that. So we had done some geotechnical work on the project before we bid it, before we designed it, and determined we had pretty lousy soils. And so we built in some different foundation systems and stuff that were necessary for that. However, when the contractor is actually on site and he's there working now, as he started doing the excavation to put in the deep footings, he discovered some additional bad soil that didn't show up in the geotech report. So we've had a couple of change orders that we need to do in order to continue with the project. So the scope of the project has increased a little bit, $600,000 on a $7 million project. But that's the reason, is because they've had some additional subsurface work that they had to do, remove some soil that was not proper for building a building on. And it's being funded with restricted funds from the fire commission. They have the money available. It's
And that project is in Muhlenberg County, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry. Greenville, sorry. Keep on thinking Glendale.
If they can find anywhere it hadn't been mined in Muhlenberg County, that would be a miracle.
Right.
But go right ahead.
It was really inexpensive property, but you see how that worked out. And
Okay.
so we're just asking for a scope funding increase for that, to be able to use restricted funds for that project.
Next slide, please.
And then the other two projects, I spoke to you last time, last board meeting, about the flood situation, both in Hyman and in Whitesburg, both affecting Hazard Community College and Southeast Community College. And at that point, we were dealing with the insurance companies and analyzing the buildings to find out what the damage was and what it was going to cost to do that. At that time, we just had estimates on what that would cost. We now have solid numbers for both of those. At Hazard, for the two buildings there, the Opportunity Center and the School of Craft, it's $7.5 million. Although that money is coming from State Risk and FM Global, which insurance proceeds, there's no funds coming from KCTCS or the college for this. We also have applied for some FEMA grants for a few items that were not going to be covered by State Risk. So we're going to end up restoring these buildings back to their pre-flood condition at no cost to KCTCS. So that's, we're asking for your approval of that number. And I think I gave you this estimate last time, and this is just actual getting approval for the numbers that are now solid enough that we're ready to start work. So this is for Hazard. And the last one is for Whitesburg, and it's the Blenda Mason building, which had a little bit of damage to it. And then the Cottle Hall building, which was first floor was totally destroyed. And so it's $3.1 million. That's the estimate I gave you last time, but now it's been firmed up, and we just need your approval to use insurance proceeds for this work. We also have some FEMA money on top of this that we're getting to take care of. There were a couple of vehicles that the college had that were not covered by the state risk insurance. They were too old to be insured anymore. And so FEMA is actually reimbursing us for those vehicles. So again, no cost to the college or to KCTCS.
It's an interesting word, reimbursement. So we have to pay for it first?
Yeah, we pay premiums. Oh,
No.
oh,
Is
I'm
is
sorry.
is
I
it
see.
reimbursing us for expenses so if we don't spend 3.1, then we only get what we've spent? Or are they distributing 3.1 based on their estimates of loss and
Yes.
therefore there really is no change in the budget?
As far as,
Andy, will you please speak in the microphone?
as far as state risk and FM Global are concerned, it's a reimbursement to us. However, I used to be with the finance cabinet. We know some tricks. So we've worked with the state budget office where they've given us a cash override for the accounts. So we're actually not expending any money in advance.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sorry about that. And those are the items.
We're finished.
Okay.
Just need a
Ma'am.
motion.
All right, we're going to vote a little differently on this, so we will need a motion to accept all projects and then a second, and then we will vote so that you don't have to go through each one of them. We'll vote with exception, with no exception, with exception, or abstained. So if you have an exception, you need to say, I have an exception to number 4 and say that. So you would be voting for 1, 2, 3, and 5, and then with exception would be number 4. So if you are accepting all, you would vote yes, no exception. Any questions on that? All right, we need a motion to accept.
I'll make the motion to accept with no exceptions.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Chair Stevens,
Aye, yes.
Vice Chair Martin,
Aye.
Secretary Fletcher,
Aye.
Regent Bogard,
Aye.
Regent Cox,
Yes.
Regent Finan,
Yes.
Regent Girdler, Regent Green,
Yes.
Regent Herdink,
Yes.
Regent Jackson,
Yes.
Regent Smith,
Yes.
and Regent Witten.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. The proposition carries.
Thank you.
Any additional comments from the board members, Regents? Hearing none, and we'll like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. The next board meeting will be March the 23rd and 24th at Bluegrass Community and Technical Center here in Lexington. Chair entertains a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yay, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.